welcome to the Hamilton County Board of County Commissioners staff meeting November 19th, 2024. We'll start with the dais. Introduce yourselves.
Lucy Rischel, Assistant Clerk.
Leslie Hervey, Clerk to the Board.
Stephanie Summerall Dumas, Commissioner.
Good afternoon. I'm County Commissioner Denise Driehaus.
Jeff Aludo, County Administrator.
Patrick Dressing, Assistant Prosecuting Attorney.
And I'm Hamilton County Commission Board President Alicia Reese. All right, we'll get right to it. We have a hearing to consider MSD 2025 operating budget and MSD 2025 through 2029 capital improvement program. So we're going into the public hearing, but I would like to maybe get some context. If Director, would you like to start us out?
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioner President Reese and Commissioners Dumas and Driehaus. Thanks for having us back today. We did do a short presentation last week, generally going through the same information today. So I think we have the slides up to get started. First, I will introduce myself again, Diana Christie, Director of MSD. I have a crew here with me today. I have Reese Johnson, who's our Deputy Director and Chief Engineer. He'll be discussing the capital budget request after I go through the operating budget. I also have Deputy Director Ryan Welsh and Jenny Richmond, along with Joseph Schuster, who puts our budget together. He's our fiscal officer. So I will, and then after Reese and I speak, Assistant Administrator Holly Chrisman is also presenting on the MSD rate recommendation. So quickly, first, just want to talk briefly about what MSD does and why we have an operating budget that we do. So we're an essential service that this community needs. We collect and treat wastewater every day. This service is needed to keep our communities and the environment safe and healthy. This is a continuous operation. We treat on average 160 million gallons per day, and we're collecting wastewater through over 3,000 miles of pipe and 100 pump stations, and conveying that to 9 wastewater treatment plants around the district. With the addition of projects through our consent decree required wet weather improvement program, we're also building new assets to reduce combined sewer overflows. Once those assets are constructed, there are then costs to operate and maintain those. So you can see here, we have about 45 acres of green infrastructure now that we maintain, as well as wet weather facilities that operate when we are experiencing rainfall. So again, we were talking earlier today with some of you, but we do like to remind everyone we're here 24/7. We like to think about wastewater and take care of it, and hopefully so that most of you never have to. Just a quick at a glance of our service area. Again, we have our facilities located on this map, but this generally shows we serve most of Hamilton County, about 750,000 customers. We serve small portions of Butler County, Warren County, and Claremont County as well, but primarily our service area is represented on this slide, and those colors just indicate the different watersheds that convey to our treatment plants. So I will now turn to the specifics of the 2025 operating budget request. First, just as a reminder, this is an annual process. So what MSD does is each year we're looking at what our expenditures are, what new needs we have. We do personnel projections and contract reviews so that we're projecting what we're going to need the next year and looking very closely at any projected increases. The county also shares with us targets in the summer for what they are hoping that our operating budget, any increases will be nothing greater than what the county has determined is affordable. And we submitted draft first in August. We this year submitted that and worked closely with the county team and reduced further based on just discussions that we had, really tried to get the budget down to only what we need. We do have a strong track record of not exceeding our budget. So these reductions that we make, we then, we manage the budget with the approved amount annually. And we're here before the board today because, of course, the board has the authority over the MSD funds. These MSD funds are ratepayer dollars, and they are restricted only for the use of MSD, but the board must approve the requested budget for MSD to use any of those funds. Oops, I went the wrong way. Sorry. So digging into the 2025 operating budget request further, on the slide you have just a snapshot of what is included in greater detail in the budget book. This was shared with the commissioners. It's also available on both the MSD and county websites, so there's a full operating budget request. But here I have represented by category the 2025 request, breaking down the O&M portion, which is our personnel budget and non-personnel for each of our 7 divisions, along with an other personnel, other non-personnel category. First, the personnel request for 2025 is $66.6 million. That is the personnel, those are the personnel dollars needed to fund, again, all 7 of MSD's divisions, everything from the Office of Director, our administration, so our finance and accounting folks, to all of our operating divisions and the engineering group. So the personnel that we have that makes up this budget, it's about 600 employees. We have about 60 plus vacancies at any given time. So this is the needed funding for those positions. I'd also like to just share that was looking at the numbers today. So of the filled positions, about 85% of the MSD positions are union represented. We have 4 local ASME unions at MSD, along with the code union, the city code union. So then the non-personnel request, that's about $73 million for 2025. In our non-personnel divisional category, we've seen, of course, inflationary increases along with everyone individually and business community. We're seeing a lot of ongoing increases in our utilities, so our gas and our electric. Chemicals, which is a big expenditure, continue to increase, but this also covers things like lab supplies, maintenance supplies, IT software licenses, our funding for the Cincinnati area GIS or CAGIS, inspections of sewers, and professional services that we utilize for a lot of our services as well. And then finally, the other non-personnel that rounds out the O&M subtotal there, that is our capitalized expenditures for our fleet and our office technology equipment allowance, along with our general fund overhead that we pay to the city. So that total, as you can see, is close to $147 million, and this does represent about a 2% increase over the approved 24 budget. Once we add in the SBU and debt, and we'll talk further about the SBU program request in a few slides, the grand total of our 2025 budget request is $244 million. Again, the total is also about 2% higher than the current year approved budget. So I'm going to just dive in a little bit further on the primary increases that we're seeing that really impacted the budget request this year more than just the standard cost of living increases or the inflationary increases. So with personnel, we actually were able to reduce the personnel request just slightly, but this was not due to any reductions in our personnel. It is because we looked at the capitalized labor from our engineering division. So that entire division works on our capital improvement program, and we've always charged a portion of that labor to capital, but this year we increased that, just the amount that we can charge to that labor allowance, and that allowed us to realize some savings on the operating side. The non-personnel increase is a little higher than the typical inflationary of the rest of it, so I'm going to jump into that on the next slide. And then the other non-personnel, we also had a slight decrease, really just trying to be efficient with these budgets, find anything that we can defer into a future year to have a overall smaller increase than we did when we first looked at the budget. So again, this is where I'm just highlighting some of the specific increases on that non-personnel. Most of these increases, again, because most of the non-personnel budget is attributed to the operating costs in our operating divisions, meaning our treatment plants, our collection system, our compliance division, so that's all the lab work. That's where the bulk of our costs are, and that's also where some of the largest increases are. In particular, we had a a few of our chemical contracts, so the purchase contracts, we're seeing much higher than other areas in terms of the inflationary increases. So one in particular, polymer, that's the increase we've seen since 21. It must be rebid again in 25. So really just trying to track those and make sure we have the funding, because these are needed for our daily operations, along with both the sodium hypochlorite and sodium bisulfite. So you can see there just some of those increases that really, those are not discretionary, and they really are beyond our control. As well as we saw a contract that was renewed in 24 for our solids hauling and disposal that went up about 24%. So those costs were included in the request for 25. The security contract was another one where we saw a higher than normal increase. That was a contract that was rebid last year, and in addition to just increases in the cost of the service itself, MSD needed to expand our security coverage at some of our facilities, really to just control the facilities and protect our assets. I've included some of the figures on these slides. These are all in the book, and they're things that just really, help demonstrate where those non-personnel costs are. So this is the treatment division in particular. 38 million of our non-personnel costs are in that wastewater treatment division. So that's about half of the overall non-personnel budget. But again, if you go through the book, it kind of breaks those down into greater detail by division. Finally, wanted to just take a closer look at the sewer backup program request. So again, the sewer backup program is administered by MSD. It's within our wastewater collection division, but the funding for this program is pulled out of the budget, really just to represent it outside of that O&M category. But again, it's a MSD administered program. As you can see there, we are showing on the right side the SBU program activities that are through this current year. We report out on the details of the expenditures and the activities under the sewer backup program monthly, and that's on our website. But this snapshot here just shows you through October of 24. And on the left, just the overall program request, we have kept it flat. So the request for 25 is 11.2 million, which has been the same in both 23 and 24. In 23, the total expenditures were, as you can see, 7.6 million. This year, we're again trending about that same amount. So the year-to-date being 5.8, we're expecting that we're going to come in again somewhere around 8 million, perhaps below, barring any really unforeseen circumstances. And then I've shown there that really what we spend those dollars on, these are the SBU program elements. So we respond in rain events to any calls to our hotline. And eligible properties are offered cleaning services. So that's that first, or that green block there, the response and cleaning. That's about 30% of the program funding. Properties that have eligible damages, we settle those claims, and so that's about 5% of the budget. And then the largest portion is our sewer backup prevention program. And this is where we are, for eligible properties, we're designing and constructing individual private property solutions. This is not work. These solutions to the SBU program are on those private properties. This is not work in the MSD public sewer system. So each one is essentially its own project. They do take some time, but we have, and I don't know if I have the total there, because I think I just have the annual totals on the right, but again, this is information that we report out regularly. We have over 1,200, I think, sewer backup prevention programs in our system since this program was initiated in 2004. So it's a large portion of the cost of the SBU program. If you want more information about both the program itself, but the locations of some of the services provided, in addition to this information, we also report out quarterly through our consent decree reports. There's a significant amount of information about the sewer backup program activities that we include in that quarterly report, and that is all also available on our website. So with that, I wanted to turn it to Reese Johnson to take the capital program request, and then we'll address questions. Or did you, I apologize, would you like to address questions on the operating budget before I turn it to Reese? Or should we continue?
Oh, continue, please.
Okay, Reese, you're up.
President Reese, nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Commissioners Dumas and Driehaus, good to see you again. I'm here to present the 2025 capital budget for MSD. And go in the right direction. Okay, so today I'm presenting the 2025 capital budget request. The total capital budget request is $529 million. The appropriation upon passage, the actual action that we are asking for today, is just under $83 million. What that allows is over $45 million worth of planning, design, and easement work to continue. There's 6 projects and 9 allowances that allows to immediately go forward, as well as $37.9 million in construction allowances. There's 4 allowances that allow us to do some very critical asset management work. And as we have done in the past, we continue the standard of asking for those appropriations at this stage. And then the balance of the construction dollars, which it's a large balance, $446.7 million, is for the 5 projects that are ready for construction that we will return to the board and ask permission and authorization to initiate construction on those specific projects. And at the bottom there, you see a tally of the last 5-6 years of the capital improvement program budgets. 2025 is a very large year, and we'll get into the reasons, the drivers, and the challenges that has presented us this year. So 2025 is a difficult year, challenging year. We are still under negotiations with the consent decree parties, and so that has some drivers in it, that has some commitments we've made that are driving some of these costs. Most importantly, we've come to the time for construction of 2 very large WIP projects that are consent decree driven. The first is the construction of the Mill Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant Influent Pump Station. This is a large pump station, 700 million gallons per day, that serves both the plant that we have now, as well as the high rate treatment facility that is intended to be co-located with the plant. And that's a $269 million construction project starting in 2025. The second piece is the construction of the East Branch Ohio River Interceptor Extension, the Yabori project, for $163 million. 2 things I'd really like to highlight about this project, another large one. First of all, this is a fantastic example of collaboration between the board and Ohio DOT, where this is being tied in with the work that both at the funding both at the state and the federal level is doing and investing in this area with the new Brent Spence Bridge and reducing the runoff coming from the highways that right now get into our sewers. So this is taking significant amount of flow off our system in that area. And second of all, this is a big number. It's a number that we need to ask for authorization in the coming year, but this will be reimbursed through an agreement and a partnership with ODOT that the board has brokered that will allow that to be fully repaid back to MSD. The other thing I want to highlight in 2025 is, as though we were really constrained by the large WIP spending, we wanted to make sure that we were addressing some of the things that really affect our ratepayers, and that's those suffering from SBUs. So we have earmarked special funding to look at more strategically the SBUs, the sewer backups, and the hotspots that are around the entire county. This is in addition to the money that Director Christie just talked about that is in our operating budget and is continuously in our operating budget. But this is some not extra funding, but this is funding we've earmarked in 2025 to make sure we are looking at these more strategically so that we could try to get ahead of it and prevent them more than just react to them. We work very closely with the administration over the last several months. As Director Christie said, there's a process we all know and love over the last several months getting to where we are. And we recognized that there is significant pressures on the community, and with the large WIP spending that has been committed to, there's not a lot of other room. So we have already looked hard at our entire capital improvement program and have deferred 15 sewer rehab and replacement projects, and we've also deferred the design of one pump station and the replacement of a second pump station. Recognizing that these don't go away, but this is not the year with the other large responsibilities that we have, the commitments we have, those we're deferring to future years. We also felt that it wasn't wise to start any new planning projects in 2025 when we are having to defer a significant number of projects that were already ready for construction. We're really trying to recognize the challenge this year and appreciate that the administration has been working closely with us to try to balance those as best we all can. But we hope that that's just this year, and hopefully through the successful negotiations with the consent decree parties, that we will continue to be able to move forward in our 5-year plan. The 5-year plan was also submitted as part of the budget request. It includes all of our projects, which total about $2 billion worth of work going out over 5 years. This is founded on good engineering practice, solid engineering practices, looking at condition assessment and risk-based prioritization. We're hoping that the future years will allow us to return to a more manageable level of asset management investment alongside the continued expectations that we'll have under the consent decree. That is the end of the capital budget. I'll turn it over to Assistant Administrator Tolly. Sorry. I froze.
Oh, do you have that? Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Better late than never. I know. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm here today to talk to you about the recommended rate increase for MSD. But to start with, I'd like to just remind the public that the Board of County Commissioners exercises the fiduciary responsibility over MSD, and in doing so provides sufficient funds to support the operations, as well as the requirements necessary for the operation of this important utility. This all is balanced with being mindful of the ratepayers, and of course the board negotiates the federal consent decree matters. So I'm going to pause until this comes up. There we go. Thank you, Christy. So you've already heard the budget. I'm not going to go through this again, but just want to reiterate that administration is supportive of MSD's recommended CIP and operations budget. And I do want to thank both MSD and the county team, several members who are here. We have Joe Graff, JP Birmingham, Karen Ball, Jonathan Daughtry, and then we have online our financial advisors with PFM. So it was a great team effort. It was a difficult, challenging year, as MSD mentioned. And I'm thankful for the team and MSD for getting us to this point. So just at a high level, to fund the operations of the sewer district, there is no county or city general fund dollars into the operation. It is collected from revenue from basically primarily 3 sources. You have the sewer service charges that all residents, businesses, and industry pays that are customers of MSD. The excess strength surcharges, which are applied to commercial customers that discharge high strength waste to a MSD plant, and an annual fee for industrial pretreatment. When we looked at the rate requirements for this year, as you can see on the slide, they are evaluated to make sure they support the operating and capital budget. And this year, we really took a strong look at the long-term view over a 10-year period to try our best to have rate stabilization and predictability. So when the county financial team and MSD and the county team worked together on the rate increase needed to support these budgets, there are several factors that go into that, and you can see those here. The inputs include estimating the operating budget growth, as well as the consent decree projects and capital costs. And of course, appropriate assumptions are applied for various economic factors such as inflation and bond rates. Our goal, as I think the board knows, over the 10-year consent decree period is to try and keep rates as flat as possible so that rate adjustments are consistent instead of doing big up and down swings. In addition to looking at the capital and the operating and the 10-year plan, we also look at MSD's operating cash reserves as well as the debt service coverage. MSD's debt service coverage is regularly cited as a major contributor to the sewer district's excellent credit rating. If these levels deteriorate, it could lead to a rating downgrade. And of course, lowered credit ratings can have significant implications on the cost to finance and borrow for capital projects. So as such, we try to minimize the impact of borrowing costs and try and keep our debt service coverage at 1.7 times by the end of the 10-year planning period. Of course, we do recognize there will be fluctuations amongst year to year, but we do want to end the planning period with that debt service coverage. The other, as I mentioned, is liquidity or cash reserves. This is obviously critically important to the operations and financial health of MSD, and again, as well as an important consideration when it comes to our rating agencies. The surplus fund balance that we want to keep over that 10-year period, again, knowing it will fluctuate year to year, is $150 million. As this chart shows, going back to 2016, MSD surplus was well above that, and that started dropping in 22 and 23. We are projecting by the end of 24 to get back up into that range where we want the surplus to be. So just as some perspective for historic rate increases, as you can see here, during phase 1 of the consent decree for about the first 6 years, rate increases were average 7.9% annually. For several years, from 16 to 22, there were no rate increases, and you can see from the previous slide why. There was that large surplus balance, so rate increases were not necessary during those times. But again, in 23 and 24, there was a need for a 3% increase each year. So as shared with the board earlier this year, we are attempting to balance the legal requirements of the federal consent decree that we are under with Department of Justice, US EPA, and Ohio EPA, with the operational and asset management needs of this important utility. You've heard from MSD, they're deferring some capital projects to work within the difficult budget year we had this year. And then in terms of the economic factors outlined, we are recommending a 4.5% rate increase for 2025. I do want to clarify something that was at the last meeting. Administration with MSD concurrence does not recommend including the 4.5% rate increase with the high strength surcharge. And the reason is, we're happy to announce that MSD is doing a cost of service study, and they do anticipate that being finalized within the next month or two, which is very close to when this rate increase would go into effect. So we would like to review that report before we apply any rate increase to that class of customers. We'll be ready to make a recommendation to the board either in 2025 or also for rate increases potentially for 2026. I want to be very clear though, commercial industrial customers will be subject to the 4.5% sewer services that we all would be applied to if this recommendation is approved. So in terms of the need for a rate increase, to summarize, this will generate the resources necessary for MSD to operate. You heard the challenges they've been facing not only this year, but in previous years with rising costs. This does support the capital improvement plan, which does improve water quality as well as public health. It helps manage the future revenue adjustments that we've talked about over this 10-year planning period. It does keep us managing and compliant with the consent decree. And of course, as I mentioned, in terms of the debt service coverage and the surplus fund, it does provide prudent financial management practices. So with that, I think MSD or I are happy to answer any questions. I do again want to say PFM is on the line if there are specific financial questions to be answered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go to our speakers, I will open it up for the commissioners. Vice President Driehaus.
Thank you. A lot of my questions were answered at the previous public hearing, but we did receive a memo in response to some of the questions that were raised at the last public hearing. And I'm wondering if either Holly or Diana could just address some of the top line issues in the memo. I think we received it today. And so I haven't had a lot of time to dig into that.
Can you identify the memo? Who's it from?
From Holly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. We said today. So yes, the memo that was written in conjunction with both administration and MSD attempted to answer some questions that were raised during Thursday's public hearing. I can go through some of those. I'll defer to Director Christie for more specific, some of the more specific MSD related questions. The first was related to the sewer surcharges, which I think I just addressed in my presentation, in terms of we are concerned about passing on a rate increase to that class of customers when we do have a cost of service study coming very shortly, and we would like to use the results of that study to inform that rate increase that may be necessary for that group. We did have quite a few questions at the public hearing on the impervious surface charge. In particular, the status of it. I think we covered that at the last meeting, which is the board does have a memo. There was not 100% consensus on that. I think we talked about that in depth last week. And the question was, would it impact rate increases? I'll look at Diana if she wants to take it, or do you want me to? I can take it. Okay.
Well, I think one of the key points we wanted to make in response to the questions is that in addition to there being a lack of consensus from the stakeholders, so there is not a recommendation to move forward. But until the board has a chance to really review what has been presented to them, the implementation of an impervious surface charge is not. We're not at the point where that would be something that could be implemented in the next year or two. It really is it's still quite a long process because it is a complete restructuring of how MSD charges its customers. It's adding new customers that are not currently in our billing system, and so we really there's, in addition to a lot of work that is being asked of the stakeholders, that is additional analysis that would take time. If a decision was made, there is a lot of work to really implement a new program like this. So that is one reason why it wouldn't impact today's budgets, what we're looking at for 2025. And then the other point that's made in the memo is just that, again, when you're looking at establishing new ways of charging our customers, it's and that there's more detail in here, but essentially you're looking at redistributing those charges and who those customers are. So while some customers would see potentially decreases in what they're paying today, other customers would see increases in what they're paying today. And then you have a new group of customers just coming into the MSD customer realm that pay nothing today. So you can't characterize it simply as something that would either increase or decrease rates. It's a redistribution of how we charge customers, and it will depend very specifically on individuals' circumstances. So I think that hopefully addresses that one.
We also heard a few comments about eliminating the Mill Creek High Rate Treatment Plant and deferring what we understand to be the Mill Creek pump station. So we're going to, Reese has a response to that, and then we'll move on to the questions from there.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, there was a concern raised by a commenter about the high cost for that was committed to in this year's budget or 2025's budget, and a recommendation to defer that work on the Mill Creek pump station. And first, the high rate treatment facility is not in this year's budget request. It's the pump station. That's the piece that we need to do starting next year. And that is a critical piece of MSD infrastructure. Without the pump station at the head of the plant to bring the flows into the plant, nothing gets treated, whether it's going through the regular treatment plant that we have now, or in the future, once the consent decree is negotiated, the high rate treatment facility that's proposed there. That pump station is over 60 years old. It is functionally obsolete. It is a tremendous risk to our infrastructure and to our community. I would hate to think what would happen if that pump station were to fail. We're on borrowed time with it already, and so it is a desperately needed aspect, both for our asset management and for our compliance with the future elements of the consent decree. So that's our response on the suggestion or the recommendation to defer that cost from this budget. The next one was. Sure, I'll keep going. Similar comments were raised about the costs of CSO reduction. So that's what we're trying to do through the consent decree, right? Is remove overflows to keep them going into our rivers. And in phase one, we were doing the most cost-effective ones that we could, the lowest cost ones. And we recognize now that we're in phase two, we're having to tackle the CSO overflows that are harder to get at. And so they are more expensive. And so while we can't substantiate the specific numbers that were provided in the last hearing, we do recognize, we all recognize that they are going to be more expensive gallon per gallon in this phase two than they were in phase one, irrespective of the inflationary factors that happen. We're just going after harder to get at gallons. We're not the only utility facing that challenge. There's utilities across the country facing that same thing, and they're fighting it. They've taken it to court and they've lost. So we're continuing to focus on what is the most cost-effective way we can get CSO gallons out, and we keep focusing on what is the most cost-effective way to do it. We look at green infrastructure, we look at separations, we look at all of the tools in our toolbox every time we pick up a project, but we know that they're going to be more expensive gallon for gallon moving forward. Third one? All right. Lucky me. At least I can remember your name now. Great questions were also raised about focusing our current system, funding the operation of our current system. And Ms. Chrisman, Ms. Christie also both highlighted the collaborative work the administration and MSD have been working on for months, culmination of years of working together, that look, we have to balance the consent decree requirements that we've made commitments to and our asset management needs to keep the system running, to keep the wheels on the bus, as they said last time. And so we're working hard to balance those needs. There is approximately, as I put in the slides, there's $38 million worth of asset management work dedicated in the capital budget. There's about $7 million more in projects and very few very few high priority asset management projects that we have brought forward in the 2025 budget. But we've also had to defer about $33 million worth of other asset management projects that we'll program into future years, and hope that as the consent decree negotiations proceed, we will be able to return to that level of asset management spending. But we feel that with the administration's support, we've together reached a good balance for this year, recognizing that we have those two really large capital projects that are moving to construction next year, which are very large. So I think that's the last one.
Yes, the last item that was in response to last week was with respect to the SBU program funding. So as I was mentioning in the presentation, the SBU program has been funded at a little over $11 million, and we do recognize and have reported that we have not utilized that amount of funding. So 23, I think it was 7.6 million, but on average, we have over the last 4 or 5 years spent about 8 million of that money. Of course, any money that is unspent that had been approved in the budget goes back to source, so it's available for future funding of any program at MSD. So we had indicated just keeping it flat and not reducing that budget because, again, it is so unpredictable in terms of what kind of year we will have with wet weather and some of the extreme storms that do result in really high spikes. However, that that when that does happen, the impact to our budget is lags behind. So it is possible, and MSD and the administration looked at, it would be possible to reduce that request this year by 3 million to bring it down to what that average spending has been. And we don't think there would be any impact to our ability to, provide the services that we provide. And of course, if there was an event, we would be monitoring the fund very closely and could come back and request additional funding. However, the administration, the county financial team did look at the impact of reducing the SBU program budget by 3 million. And it's my understanding that that reduction would not impact the rate recommendation. So at this time, we did not adjust our request, but again, we would be comfortable adjusting the request by at least 3 million, or by that 3 million. It just doesn't appear to have any impact on the already recommended 4.5% rate increase. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you walking through that. I have a couple other questions, but I know we've got individuals in the audience that want to comment to the budget, so I'm going to hold my questions until the end.
Thank you, Commissioner Dumas.
Sorry. Okay, I really want to hear from the people that are here too, but I do.
Question, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a little bit. Chris, you got me messed up. Christy. Yeah. You indicated that if we reduce the amount, I brought up about the SBU. That's what was so surprising to me when I got the packet today. I thought it would look different, and the numbers are all the same. So it's like, did they listen to us or not? But when you reduce the numbers, I just want to see a lower request in general. So you might reduce the numbers on the sewer backup because the expenditures are going down. Like you said, it was 7.8 and it went down to 5 I might have from 7 to 5. So I would still recommend taking it off. And then you can always add it on. I just want to see a lower request. And also in general, the personnel cost. That's inclusive of the vacancies, isn't it?
Yes.
And I'm saying if you take some of those vacancies out, that'll reduce the cost as far as your request. I'm not saying that you can't fill those positions, but they've been vacant, and I said the last time, so long. I'm not saying take all the vacancies off, but reduce it enough where I can see a difference in the request.
So, Commissioner, if I
yes.
could hit on that piece,
Sure.
just because the vacancy thing gets confusing. So our personnel budget request already is reduced by an amount that we think is manageable, but it is we have already reduced the personnel request by the amount for 62 positions to remain vacant throughout the year. So that is a pretty significant amount. We really, we have been a little bit higher than that. We've had more than 62 positions vacant for much of this year, but we're trending lower. And where we'd really like to be is more like 40. You're always going to have turnover, so you never have every position filled at one time. But so to be clear, we already have what we feel like is maximize that reduction to account for 62 positions to remain vacant throughout the year. So we have to manage those hirings very carefully.
Well, 62.
62.
Vacancies.
So that means today we have about 600 positions filled. We have more like 700 on our table. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but we have higher than that on our table of organizations. Some are higher than 662. we cannot fill 60, we're not asking for the full amount of funding is what I mean. We've already reduced it. 62 is pretty high for us, but we recognize, that there really have been a lot of retirements, believe it or not, still just kind of climbing ourselves out of COVID and that early retirement package, but we're trending the pace of filling positions a bit faster now and starting to bring that number down.
Well, we can always fill them, no matter if we reduce it or not. My recollection is that they've been vacant for quite a while, and why couldn't you just reduce down a little more on the staffing? And then you can always get it filled they've been vacant forever. And then the impervious fee, I think Holly said, no, you might have said this also, that it would take 1 to 2 years to implement it, which I got sick when I heard that. I know it's a different system and you're including more people in the system, because I was very adamant about the board need to make a decision one way or another if we want that. And even if we make the decision by the end of this year, it would still take 2 years to get that process going. So that was a little bit of a bummer for me. And then I noticed too that your surplus funding is going up, which is it's lower than what you're accustomed to, but that was one reason for the increase in the rates, because the surplus was going down. Am I right about that? Or?
Yes, the surplus fund today is it's projected by the end of this year to be in the range of where the county's financial advisors like to see it. So that has been in part due to the rate increases the last couple of years, and also some financial decisions to have a bond sale. So, but ultimately the county's financial team has really developed those where they would like to see the surplus fund and what is that comfort zone.
So basically what I'm saying, it's positive that the fund is going up.
Yes.
It had been much higher at times before, but that sort of supports for me the fact that you can reduce some of the things that you're asking for, minimal reduction. I think we can ask for a little less than 243 is where I'm at. If you look at personnel reduction and if you look at the sewer backup, as you said, you could probably take 3 out of that. So we could probably end up with a smaller number, in my opinion. And so I don't want it just to be my opinion, because it was my opinion the last time, but I don't know how we go about it as a board. Are you going to look at that before we decide on voting for this, or is it just an opinion?
Commissioner, the decision and like the time to vote on the budget, I believe, will be on Thursday, and we can certainly, we really wanted to come back today, share the information that we received in terms of the impact to rates of a reduction on the SBU program. So we didn't make any changes yet, but you don't have before you that legislation to decide. So I am certainly comfortable and would just like to confer with county administration with reducing the sewer backup budget by that $3 million. The personnel budget, I really just, it's, as director, I cannot recommend that we reduce that any further. The positions that we have vacant are not the same positions that were vacant 5 years ago. It is the constant churn and turnover and the difficulty to fill some of these skilled labor positions when we have retirees. So we're constantly, I believe in, this was a couple months ago, but I was looking at the vacancy turnover. So we've filled almost 100, probably over 100 by now, positions this year, and yet we're still at that same vacancy. So we're filling within, we're oftentimes promoting within to fill the new vacancy, and it's just a constant struggle. So the positions, the personnel staffing we have a lot of overtime costs that is in there, and that just continues to go up the more you cut or hold positions vacant. We certainly have areas where we do not have the personnel needed to, properly, stay on top of maintenance activities, and all those things lead to our inability to provide the service that we have. So I feel very confident that the personnel request that we have before you has already been reduced to the level that we feel, that is a responsible level of personnel for the utility, and would not recommend cutting it any further.
We're not talking about cutting people. We're talking about cutting spots, vacancies, and if we get someone, because we know these are specialized positions, and as I said earlier, a lot of them have been open for quite a while. So we're not talking about taking anybody's jobs. We're trying to fill those jobs, but at some point it's consistently vacant. I don't understand the hesitancy to reduce 10 positions, which could affect the budget. So that's where I am on that. That's all I have.
Yes, Mr. Ludo.
Just wanted to, on the Commissioner Summer Dumas, I think had a procedural question in there I just wanted to address. And that as it relates to the $3 million reduction in the SBU program. So I think, as Diana had reported last week, SBU is a bit of a roll of the dice, as the board knows, that 1 year we can have a drought and have very little in terms of SBU claims. Next year we could have torrential rainfall and have significant claims. So the board has, I think, some discretion in terms of where you wind up setting that. I think, Commissioner, to your question, yes, I think in order for MSD to reduce that number and bring something back to you in legislation, it would require just a concurrence of the board that, yes, that is a change that we want to make to that, and then the district could then act on that and bring that back in the legislation.
Thank you. I know we can always defer, and if we need more, we can put more in. But if we're not using it, why do we keep putting in the same amount? So that's all I'm saying. So.
Okay. Okay, was the procedure, so what are we doing in that regard?
So in that regard, as it relates to that, if there is a majority of the board that would like to see that that MSD implement that $3 million reduction, then the legislation that comes back on Thursday would reflect that.
Yeah. And then Thursday is there a reason it has to be Thursday?
There's not a specific reason. That's just the date that had been targeted for passage of the budget. I don't know that there's anything magic about Thursday as a date to enact the budget, though. But that's the date that is scheduled on the agenda.
Well, I think if a commissioner asks a lot of times I've been on the other side where I don't get the support, but I just think if a commissioner, we're trying to get the cost down on behalf of the taxpayers, I think we should look at everything. So I wouldn't be against, looking at it. There's no deadline to vote on Thursday to rush in with a increase on the taxpayers. So, I wouldn't be against looking at it. I don't know what that.
Yes.
I'm in favor of, we talked about this last time at the last public hearing, and so I think we both said we were in favor of looking at this reduction. I would like to talk a little bit about what the benefit is, where that money will go, and I think there are going to be some suggestions perhaps from the public as they come forward. There's one about a zero tolerance odor policy in Lower Price Hill, and so I'm interested to know if any of those dollars could be identified for that purpose, and so, but that hasn't been discussed by MSD.
Well, let me say I'm here now, and you got 3 people that said yes, so that's the answer to that question. Okay, so now's my turn for questions.
Can I just ask the question about personnel? Are you interested in reducing the request for personnel from 66 million because of all the vacancies that are inclusive in this?
So again, Commissioner, I want to, again, it does get confusing. So to be clear, the personnel request, we have 674 positions.
I understand.
We are only asking the board to fund 612 positions. So we have already reduced the request by that number of vacancies that I've shared. So meaning I can't advertise for a position, if we do not have the funding, or you will not authorize the funding. So I do not recommend reducing that any further. It will put us into a hiring freeze if we don't have enough funding beyond that amount, because we're only requesting that the board fund, that lower 612 positions, because we're acknowledging that the 674, we will have that number vacant. So that's the 62. We're not we've already reduced the amount, the request by that amount. And I do not recommend reducing it any further. That is already higher than where we or comfortable.
I mean, that's a
The positions,
scare tactic.
It is-
It'll be a hiring freeze. The money will be there, but we're not requesting the money this time, that's all. It's not like the money goes away.
I will, if we request less than that, I will not be able to fill positions that are currently vacant. So we have already cut the budget by that amount, and that is a significant amount of vacancies to
That's
operate
a
the
lot of
utility.
vacancies to continue to fund.
We're not funding, so that's where I'm trying to be. We are not asking you to fund the vacancies. We have, so you take, 674 positions, the cost of that is higher than what we asked for. We cut the request by the total that is 62 positions. So we are only asking you to fund that lower amount, meaning it can't be filled this year.
But did I just ask way at the beginning, and I'm done, does this include the vacancies? Does that amount that you requested include the vacancies? And you said it did.
Yes, and I apologize. I think it includes the credit. So it assumes, it accounts for those positions remaining vacant. In other words, we are not asking for them to be funded.
Go ahead.
Can you give me those numbers real quick again? There's how many?
So it's 674 positions.
Okay.
We're only asking you to fund 612.
Now, that difference, okay, the 612, those people are already people that have been hired, is what you're saying?
Yes, I mean, on any given day, I might have almost a 5-position swing, so.
Okay, but these are people already in these,
But yes, it's about that, yes, currently.
okay,
Okay, I'm done.
okay.
Thanks.
But we have concluded those questions to look into, the SBU, and there'll be some others, I'm sure, as we go. I have a question about the rates. One of the big issues, we just had an election, and the number one issue is the economy. People out here, working class people, struggling to make these ends meet. And everything's going up. So I have a question on the rates, is what have some concerns about. Last time, there was a 3% increase. I voted against it. I was outnumbered. I want to know the recommendation, 4.5, is that on top of the 3%? So in other words, like you have on here, some years, 2016, 2009 to 2015. So it would be 2003, 2025. Would it be 7.5% now they would be paying?
And the 4.5% is on top of last year's rate.
On top of, so we at 7.5% would be what the ratepayer, is that, you're shaking your head no, she's saying yes. Last time it was 3%, you're recommending an additional 4.5%, is that clear?
Commissioner, so just.
Or am I misreading?
No, I think we might be just saying the same thing in a different way. So last year's rate increase was 3%.
Right.
This year's rate increase is recommended at 4.5%. It is not an additional 7.5%, but it is an additional 4.5% on top of the increase from last year. But it is not an increase of 7.5%. It is an increase this year of 4.5%, which then, yes, would be on top of the 3 was from last
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is last year you had 3. This year I'm already at 3. If I didn't do anything else, I'm at 3. Now you coming with 4.5, and you add that up between last year and this year, now it's 7.5%. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, that's how people pay their bills. I mean, it's I'm just the average person at home to understand what's happening is 7.5% based on these 2 years, just like you did your chart. If you go back to your chart, we can pull that back up. In the chart, will you pull the chart up, please? The surplus fund. And we have to look at this billing in the context of the economy right now. That's what I'm looking at, the economy.
That's the
We on the wrong one. We on
budget.
expenditures, I'm sorry. But I'm about to say, that's the budget. So in this, branding, huh? In this, though, what I'm looking at is in the surplus is 100, you got 185, right?
Projected, yes.
Projected, but still. And then in 22, it was 155. Okay, now when you go to what did the commission do in 22, when we was at 155, I wasn't around, I don't know if they were around. We was at no increase at 155, when you look at that surplus.
In 20,
I'm looking at this thing, what you had on
I
here.
remember, we have to go to the next.
2018 to 2022, you got 0% annual.
Yeah.
I'm just going by what you had. You want to pull it up?
The increase
so I
in
can-
23 and 24, correct.
Yeah, put it back to historic increases. Let's go to that page. I want to make sure I'm reading it right. On here, I didn't write it. 2018 to 2022, 0% increase. That's what I'm looking at.
Yes, that's what you're.
Okay, now let's go back to the other page. Let's look at what we had in the surplus in 2022. We were less than what we projecting now, and we didn't go up. We went up in 23. When it went down, I would say the commission went, I didn't vote for it, but when it went down to 91,000. But now we're higher than 22, and we're looking for an increase. That's where I have my questions. I would like to see the chart to go back to 2009 to 2015 that's referenced in here. The last time we were at 7, we were at, between those years, average, which is what we're doing, an average. When you put these years in 25, it'll be an average. It'll be 7.5% if we did the average based on how you wrote this.
No, Commissioner, no,
Is that correct?
No, so that is a 7.9% average annual increase in those years.
Okay.
So that means every year they were doing.
They did 7.9.
They were doing close to that. So
Yeah, I'd like to see what the reason I brought that up. I just want to know what was the surplus on those years. I know we didn't go back that far, but if I could get that, that would help me. What I'm concerned about is that in 22, go back to the chart. We had that much money. We said we want to stay at about 150. We were at 155. Now we're at projected 185, and we're 22, no increase. 24, we want an increase. So that was kind of
Yeah,
what I
I
was
think-
trying to understand.
And I apologize if we haven't been clear with this with the board over the past year, but we have been talking about looking at rate increases over a 10-year period to keep them as flat as possible, and we have large capital projects with the consent decree. So we are looking at a 10-year period, not just one metric. We're looking at several factors to determine the rate increase. We do have PFM on the line. I think Bethany's on if she wants to add anything specific to answer your question on that. But again, we're not just looking at one thing. I understand your comment related to this slide, but we are looking at several factors, in particular, the large debt we have to take to finish this consent decree over a 10-year period.
I got what you're saying, and there's new leadership. I'd like to see what they're going to do based on the new leadership. But my question is, we vote on this annually, and if I'm Susie that's at the House right now, and that's how Susie and others voted on the economy, and Susie is saying, you got a surplus that went up. And why are you going up on me if you went up with your surplus, if I'm Susie at home? And so just keeping it real basic and understandable, if you're going up, that's why we stopped doing increases. Obviously, you got up to real high numbers up there. But when you even look at, what's that, 2018, I don't have my glasses on, but when you look at 2018, that's how they got up. They kept going with these rates. But if I'm got a surplus and it's a bad economy and I'm struggling out here, I'm trying to hold on to my house, property tax done jumped through the roof. I'm going to the grocery store, eggs and bacon done jumped out the cart. I can't afford it. I understand your 10-year plan, but you went up on, you projecting 185. Can't I get some relief this year? I can understand, although I didn't vote for it, 2023, because that was a bad year too. But now we got a surplus, and I understand we got a 10-year plan and this and that, we need to keep fighting the federal folks. We got new leadership and they gonna do some things differently. We don't even know who's gonna be around in those departments. But why can't Susie get a break if we went up with a higher surplus? That's what I'm saying. Based on the chart, I mean, you put the chart together. I'm just reading your number.
Right, and I'm trying to explain that we are looking at several factors. PFM, Bethany has raised her hand and would like to just follow up on
I
it.
understand.
If that's okay.
Yeah, no, I understand PFM and they got but you know, they're looking at numbers and I'm talking about Susie's budget. So I don't need to look at PFM. I'm talking about Susie at the house that doesn't have a degree in economics, but got to balance her budget. And we just had an election, and the number one issue is the economy. And so why would we come right back? I don't care how many statistical experts, consultants, I appreciate them, but I'm talking about Susie at home right now, getting ready to go into Thanksgiving, can't afford a turkey basket, coming out of Christmas, and now we're talking about going up. She just went up on her property taxes, can't keep the house, and now we're up here talking about a 10-year plan, and you got a new leadership. You don't even know if these people gonna even be around. And we got a surplus. I mean, it was different. I mean, we got a surplus. So we're just trying to figure out how can we creatively, maybe we do need a freeze. We need a freeze on these rates. We need a freeze right now. So a restart. So that's why I wanted to bring that up. But I don't need to hear from PM. Appreciate all they've done. They've done their job. But I'm looking at Susie at the house, the senior citizen that ain't gonna get no extra money on with their Social Security check. Hope they will have a Social Security check. And we up here talking about we getting ready to go up and we got a surplus. So that's all. There's no criticism to anybody. It's just me looking at this. If I'm at home and I'm trying to hang on and I don't even know if they're gonna have Social Security checks no more. And I'm up here and I'm looking at, y'all got a surplus and you trying to put some more stuff on me. Can I get a little break? So that's where I'm coming from. I know others will have whatever they got to talk about, but I'm just keeping it real basic because we collect from everyday citizens that's just trying to survive out here. And I'm happy we had a surplus. I just wonder, can we pass that off as good news to the ratepayer? And maybe we can't. But I'm not supportive of increased rates right now with the surplus. And I don't care what we talking about, because I know that the economy is tough right now. So that's my points. Yes, Mr. Aludo.
Just one bit of context on the surplus. So, and Holly or Diana, correct me on this, but as we talk about the surplus, I just want to be mindful of the fact that that the surplus, well, it talks about 185 million. There is a level of that fund that is looked at by financial institutions and the bond community and in our bond covenants. And I think that number is around 150 million that is required. So for the public watching at home, I would just want to comment that 185 million surplus is a little bit of a misrepresentation in terms of what is required by the county. That you can see as the surplus started coming down and we started becoming a little bit more active about talking to the board about the potential to go away from the 0% that we had been doing. It was when that surplus started approaching that 150 million. We dropped below it. Now we're a bit back up above it. I think, as Holly was saying, over the 10-year plan, the goal would be to keep it roughly around that 150 million number, although it might modulate year in and year out some. So I just wanted to comment.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand adding and subtracting. And if you go back to that real quick, we understand this is above $150 million. That's my point. I get what I got a calculator now. We know. We understand this is not less than 150 million. We got more than 150 million. And in 2022, when we was at 155 million, we had 0 increases. Now we're at 185 million, and we're talking about a 4.5% increase on top of the increase that just happened this past year, which, so that I understand adding and simple math, and we're not under 150 million. We're above. We got, so I want to be clear with that to the public. The public can see, they can count, they got a calculator, and they also understand they got to balance their own personal budgets. And I'm talking about the personal budgets of the ratepayers. So that's where so for me, I can't go with it. But I'd like to, we could hear from the people. Larry Falcon is the first person.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today. I want to tell you that I'm on Susie's team, so thank you, Commissioner, for advocating in that way. I want to make 3 points today on behalf of the local Sierra Club Miami group. We're supportive of the impervious surface fee. We are opposed to the Mill Creek High Rate Treatment Plant. And we want to give kudos to MSD for the quality of the East Branch Ohio River project, a lot of creativity and a lot of good networking that's happened with ODOT in order to get some work done, not paid for by us. So we like that. Going back to that impervious surface fee, and I appreciate the detailed answers to my Thursday's comments, and it's hard to have a meaningful discussion in 2-minute sound bites. But the impervious surface fee can provide a lot of relief to sewer ratepayers. Approximately half of MSD's operating budget is spent on stormwater, not on sewers. And so we need to be charging the people with the big parking lots because we're charging the sewer ratepayers for something that is not their responsibility. That's what the impervious surface fee is for. But the other thing that goes along with that is if we do charge for what runs off those parking lots, then those landowners have an incentive to hold the water where it falls and not make it MSD's responsibility. MSD really needs a bigger team. We need all our landowners on board with controlling stormwater so we can do it affordably. So let's get those stormwater generators on our team and get them to hold the water on their own property. I know that an impervious surface fee can't be done in the 2025 budget. There's some work that needs to be done to make it happen. But we don't want to wait 2 or 3 years like Director Christie said. It's up to the Board of County Commissioners to drive the timeline and make sure that work proceeds at a rate that we can get that impervious surface fee in for the 2026 budget, because Susie's been overpaying for a lot of years, and we don't want this to keep going and going and going. I have other things that I wanted to say, but in the interest of time, I'll just point out to you that the Sierra Club Miami Group's position paper on the impervious surface fee is at your desks. So feel free to look at that and be happy to have additional conversations with you offline.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Jean Nightingale?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for taking us. I'm here with the Sierra Club, too. I'm Jean Nightingale. Sierra Club, can you hear
1
me?
second, let me get that together.
Okay.
We'll start over.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I live in Price Hill, and I've been sitting on the Hamilton County Impervious Surface Fee stakeholders meetings for a number of years. And there, I learned that the current rate structure places an undue burden of costs on single-family residents, while large impervious surfaces are not billed because they're not metered connections. And yet, MSD accepts and treats these storm-generated flows from these large runoff contributors. So I really want to support the Sierra Club position and asking you to please adopt this impervious surface fee for the Metropolitan Sewer District. A more equitable fee structure, I think, would include this surcharge based on the impervious surface area of the large runoff contributors. It would also provide a financial incentive, as Larry was saying, to all landowners to adopt more efficient stormwater best practices. Like, for instance, holding stormwater right where it falls in holding tanks, or in community bioswales or rain gardens or rain barrels. Those are all possibilities where the community come together and help MSD. Such impervious surface fee would at the same time help reduce sewer bills for low-income residents who are now being forced to subsidize the owners of properties with large roofs and parking lots. And that's just not fair. And that's been going on for a long time, and we could have rain gardens rather than backups. So until we resolve this problem, we should not fund the Mill Creek High Rate Treatment Facility, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Park.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Robert Park. I'm a member of the Communities United for Action and also Sierra Club. 8 years ago, the Sierra Club wrote a paper on the rate structure. What this shows is exactly what needs to be done to address the SUSI problem. It's a very regressive rate structure for all the reasons you've heard about, the minimum charge and the big discount for the big users. What I want to talk about today is the impervious surface fee, and specifically address a question that has come up here before, and that's the impact on churches. A year ago today, the same questions were being asked. What's the impact on churches? So I have a table that shows what different churches would have to pay depending on how much water they use and depending on how much impervious surface they have, which I would like to share with you. And I want to, in particular, talk about one church that we analyzed. It's a church on the west side in the near suburbs. It's a largely African-American church, I believe. Their current combined water and sewer bill is about $450. With the proposed kind of stormwater fee we're talking about, their bill would go down to $350. That's a $100 saving. Most churches seem to be in that category. The really big ones that have a lot of impervious surface, huge parking lots, they might end up paying more, but most churches would not. If the regressive aspect of the current system, which is going to be continued into the new rate structure with stormwater fees, but half as bad, if that were fixed, this particular church would pay a sewer and water bill less than $300. That's $150 a month, $1,800 a year. That's why we should aggressively pursue a stormwater fee, and especially one that's progressive. Thank you.
Thank you. Marilyn Law.
Thank you. My name is Marilyn Wall. I'm here to comment on behalf of Sierra Club on the MSD budgets. First of all, on the East Branch Ohio River Interceptor and the connected with the Brent Spence Bridge overflows, we're very glad to see that agreement with ODOT to ODOT cover the capital costs, which effectively makes that a zero-cost project for MSD, that's either signed or close to being signed. And we hope that this is also starts a trend of not putting highway runoff, stormwater runoff into MSD combined sewers, because that's happening right now all across the county. And it increases the cost on the sewer ratepayers when we can do better by having other processes and means of addressing the stormwater. And I don't want to take time to go into all of that, but also, we look forward to talking more to MSD and the county about the high rate treatment plants. The MSD Mill Creek high rate treatment plant won't be built for another decade. The costs that are being expended to upgrade the pumps fully for that project, as well as other parts of the building, we really are concerned about the cost effectiveness of that, because MSD has said that it would only reduce about 500 million gallons, and it's overall a huge cost for a much higher cost for CSO reduction than anything that happened in phase one of the project. The Little Miami HRT is better positioned to actually reduce a lot more CSO overflows that are going into the Ohio River, which account for about $1 billion. It's still more expensive than any of the phase one projects, but it's far less expensive than the HRT. And again, I want to just mention the impervious surface fees, and we would really hope that the county can address moving ahead with that project to get some of the issues and questions straightened out so people know what it would actually cost and so on. So I've written comments because in 2 minutes,
Written
really
comments.
explain much, but thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Tom, I can't read the last name. Yeah, Croft, okay, thank you. Couldn't. The right.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Croft. I'm chair of MSD's.
One second.
I'm going to put on my glasses so I won't be able to see you. But
Okay. Start over. 1 second. Go ahead.
okay. My name's Tom Croft. I am chair of MSD's Mill Creek Community Advisory Panel. Our consistent position over the last 10 years has been a target of zero odor emissions from the Mill Creek site, and we do appreciate MSD's support of that. We recommend budget approval, but we do have some concerns. In the past 2 years, we've had increases in odor complaints. While they are below the very high levels before 1921, they do demonstrate the fragility of the operation of the aging assets on that site. And I won't go into all the details, but we've identified reasons why these things occur. But it makes it particularly disturbing when we see very high priority projects that were in the study that was done for the capital improvement program in 2019. Big priority. So here we are, we're moving back the start of design on the dewatering building replacement to 2026. And that project, even if everything goes perfectly well, won't be online until 2032. The big reason for that, of course, has been outlined, are big expenditures on a couple of projects required by the EPA. But the fact of the matter is that the one single one that is a thorn is the pump station project that we've heard described in detail. So I won't go into that except to say this only became a priority in the last 3 years. Very, very expensive, and has already been discussed. That project does not, it is vastly more expensive in terms of gallons, treatment per gallon, cost per gallon treated than anything we've ever seen in the WIP program before. I won't go on with other comments other than to say I think that the Board of Commissioners and certainly the administration all recognize the importance of being able to address the aging plant that we have to deal with, and particularly at Mill Creek. So important to the neighborhoods in that area. We've talked about what happens, for instance, if a pump station stops.
Your time is, you want to wrap
Okay.
on up? Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, that was the last public speaker. Open it up, Vice President Driehaus, you said you had some additional.
I did. Is there anybody online? I didn't know if
I didn't see,
anybody wanted to weigh in. Does Bethany not want? I thought Bethany had her hand up.
did she want to, I didn't get a card from her. Did she want to say something?
She's online. For answering questions. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't want to cut her off. Okay, thank you. So I just want to be clear on where I am on all of these conversations. So I too would love to have no rate increases. I would love to have no rate increases for MSD. However, I feel like we're in a position where we've got some responsibilities to the ratepayers to maintain this system and respond to a consent decree. Because if we don't, there are consequences to the ratepayers. In specific, when you look at the chart that had the reserve pretty high we didn't do rate increases during those years because we were spending down the reserve. We were well above the 150 that has been talked about, and we knew that, and so we wanted to spend that down and provide that relief, which we did. Once, though, we got to a level where we were at or dipping below the 150, we started to do moderate rate increases, and we've done 3% for 2 years related to those increases to try to stay within budget, to have that reserve, but also address the needs of this aging infrastructure and the consent decree. And so we have a list of projects now in front of us, and as Holly mentioned, it's not just next year. Next year's is extremely high compared to the following years. It does, and I don't want the answer to this question, but if we were to try to fund this all at once with an increase, I don't even want to know what that number is. But what I thought as a board had agreed to do was spread it out so that the rates don't go way up, for instance, next year to fund these projects, and then dip down and then dip back up and go back down. And we wanted some stability for the ratepayers so that they see what's coming, right, from year to year. And so I thought that's what we were attempting to do in this budget, and I thought that's where the 4.5 came from, because we've got this long list of projects. And so what we haven't talked about is if we were to not fund some of these consent decree projects, there are consequences to that, financial consequences to that. There are penalties that we would have to pay, rather the ratepayers would have to pay, in addition to the rates going towards these projects and asset management. And so, while I would also like to have no rate increases, I don't think that that is a responsible approach to what we know we have to do here in the next number of years by way of asset management and the consent decree. And so I am happy to look at other alternatives if the board has them to fund some of these things. And I don't want to lose track of the asset management. It's been said before, it is so important, and Tom, you mentioned it. The asset management piece of this is really critical. And we need to continue to fund a system. We don't want pipes breaking. We don't want odors. We don't want all the consequences of not paying attention to an aging sewer system. And we don't want the penalties that the federal government is going to put on us if we don't respond to the consent decree demands. So that's where I am. So, we've got a recommendation in front of us from MSD and the administration. It's about $30 a year for the average residential customer. We have also talked about relief for particularly individuals that can't afford those kinds of increases. Some people can, some people can't. We've got legislation that we have supported, and we might want to do it formally. I thought we had done it formally, but I'm told we did not. So Catherine Ingram has a bill to provide some relief to those that cannot afford increases year after year. We've supported that. I don't know where that's going in the legislature, but the impervious surface fee also takes into account some of these dynamics where some people can pay more than others. So I'm also a proponent of finishing out the impervious surface study so that we can balance out, who's paying what, but we're just not there yet. So, and I'm hoping that we do get there with the impervious surface, because I do think that in the long run that will play, or rather have an impact on some of what we're talking about today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just say, when we say the board, it was not unanimous. I did not vote for the increase last time. What I feel is responsible is what can the ratepayers and taxpayers that elected us, what can they afford? And so I'm down here looking at what can the person afford. I know we say $30. Now that's some Pampers, that's a turkey, some bacon and eggs that a person can afford. And as I've talked to so many people, and then it came out in the election, it said the number one issue is the economy. And so I can't, in good conscience, sit here and see a surplus that's above what we say the number should be, which is they said 150 was the number they said we want to stay at. And we've got 30+ million more, $185 million. And somehow we can't pass this on as good news to the ratepayer. They can't benefit from the surplus. So for me, I can't do it. I'm for the ratepayers first. I think the most irresponsible thing is Susie losing her house, or Tom can't hold on to their house to pay these bills. I mean, everything keeps going up on them. Property taxes, up on them. I've seen people crying just a floor down, barely can pay their property taxes. And then every time they look up, we can do it, and we got a formula, and we done X plus O, 2 plus A. It's not a formula, it's people. So for me, when I see this surplus going up, I said, man, can we pass on that good news? Maybe can't pass it on the next year or the following, but every year we got to vote on it. If this was something that was 10 years, then we would have done it. We wouldn't have to vote every year. I mean, it would be a 10-year plan. As it relates to the federal guidelines and everything, I mean, it's about to be different. We got to see what's going to really happen after January. What's really going to happen? What direction are they going? They got some office called efficiency. They cutting a lot of people, a lot of jobs, a lot of situations. Maybe we got to renegotiate. Maybe it's some new people to negotiate with. But as of right now, when I look at, these aren't my numbers, I didn't put them together. When I look at these numbers, and we said the surplus, we want to be at 150 million, and we're talking about we're going to be at about 185 million. I just, for me, I can't in good conscience responsibly vote for an increase when I know I've seen the people's faces. And I'm not talking about we always have a program, but you got to be super poor, or you got to be, even the senior citizens, we're fighting for that. I appreciate there's some legislation, and I really thank Senator Ingram and her fight for that. But I've been at the State House. It has not passed. It's not going. It hasn't been signed. She's got to get it going, and I appreciate her doing that. But we're going to vote to increase, and that increase takes effect immediately in January, and then we got a bill that's going to take months and months to have to try to fight for, and we appreciate her fighting for that, but the two will not be at the same time. So for me, I feel like it's, in my opinion, I might be in the minority here, but in my opinion, I'm in the majority when I go out to the people. It's irresponsible to have a surplus of 185 million, and we're saying we only need a surplus of 150 million. And then in 2022, we had 155 million, and we did not raise the rates in the surplus. According to, I'm reading these numbers. It's not true. I didn't write this. I didn't put this chart together. I'm just reading what was presented. So for me, everybody has to, do their own conscience, but the people that I've talked to, the middle-class families, the working-class families, they do not get a break. And right now, the economy is not where it needs to be financially for people to try to make it. We got a lot of folks, layoffs are happening. It's all about PepsiCo. I mean, people losing jobs. Things are happening. And so I'm trying to give the people the highest break I can give them. And I think that this is just not the time for increases. Nothing against MSD, nothing against what they're doing, but it's just not the right time. And I think we could come with hopefully a better plan, but if we can't, I cannot support it. I could not support an increase at this time, knowing the economy the way it is, knowing that people done lost their jobs, people trying to struggle, knowing property tax done jumped through the roof, eggs and bacon is at a all-time high, people can't afford to hardly buy a turkey for this Thanksgiving. I just can't support it at this time. And I'm speaking for the people that I have communicated with. But maybe there's something else. I know both of the commissioners have asked some additional information that maybe can recrunch some numbers. Commissioner?
Just a couple comments, thank you. Under the estimated unencumbered surplus fund, I'm just wondering how low do you go before you ask for an increase? Because as I can see on here, it was continuing to go down. And then now we're asking for the 4.5%. I'm assuming that our increase that we did in 2023, the 3%, is why the surplus is going up.
I'm sorry, just on that point.
Mr. Ludo,
If I
or
could.
did you want to finish your point?
I'm sorry, I didn't want
Let
to.
her finish. And
Okay,
then
sure.
Mr. Ludo,
But I want to know are you reading my mind or?
I think I was reading.
Go ahead.
You
No,
go in
you
there,
were
go
talking
ahead.
about the 3% being the reason for the surplus level going up. It actually was a bond issuance that we had done that added about $100 million to the surplus fund. So I was going to clarify that earlier, that it was because the graph kind of made it seem like that the increase was responsible for that increase in the surplus fund, and it wasn't indicated that there was actually a bond issuance that added money into the surplus fund at that point. So sorry for the interruption, Commissioner. I just wanted to make that clear.
That answer your question.
So what did the 3% do if it was the bond issue that raised the surplus?
That's a good question. I don't know exactly how much the 3% added to the surplus. I don't know if we have that information now or if we can get that. Joseph, you have that? Sorry, Commissioner.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joseph Schuster. I am an employee of MSD. I serve as their fiscal officer. I can perhaps provide a little bit of detail to what Jeff was just talking about how the surplus fund works, how the rate increases factor into how the bond issuance factored into that as well. So as you're no doubt already aware, when we're spending money for capital projects, that isn't a circumstance where we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars in one single year. We're authorizing via an appropriation for example, for the pump station, $250 million, but we're not spending $250 million in that year. It's going to take years of construction bills being paid, while that money slowly gets spent. So what happened, to refer back to what President Reese was speaking of in regards to, well, why did this surplus amount go up after we stopped raising rates? And then why did it start to decline? And then why now is it starting to increase again? Well,
That was not my question, but go on. That was not my question.
Getting a little jumpy around here. Go ahead.
As spending is authorized, it is slowly spent to construct the projects over the course of years. And as a consequence, slowly the surplus fund was used to be able to cash finance those projects, which is the most efficient way of doing so. And as time went on, it became evident that fund would become exhausted if we continued in that trend without rate increases, bond issuances, and the use of state revolving loan funds, all of which MSD has implemented over the last 24 months to one extent or another. The rate increases over the course of a single year are going to account for approximately $20 to $25 million in additional revenue, roughly, depending on exactly how much occurs in collections. And so the reason for a flat rate increase structure in order to be able to afford the projects that are being proposed in Phase 2B is to slowly begin the collection of that revenue so that you can afford to finance those projects over that 10-year period and, as necessary, slowly expend those resources in order to afford those projects. I hope that helps clarify.
Not really, but it's okay, you tried. But that's not really where I'm going. So it took 6 years. I'm looking at this. I know trends. I'm not a statistician, but it kept going down, 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 down. And so now you're trying to get this, and I'll go back to the 4.5%. It's really, answer this, whoever gave us our last packet, not you weren't here, but our last packet that we got when we discussed this, it did not have the surplus fund in it. Now, correct me if I'm wrong.
I do believe that slide was included in the presentation that Holly gave last time.
Because I usually look a little closer. It was, Holly? Okay. But it's a hard thing to sell for me. When the surplus is going up, we can assume it's going to go back down if we don't do the increase. But it's going up. And it just to reiterate what you were saying, it's beyond what what happened to my guy?
He done sat down.
Huh?
He sat back down.
No, but felt like I was talking to somebody. Now talking to air. He just kind of disappeared. It's okay. I didn't mean to offend you. Did I offend you? Oh, okay.
I do as I told.
Huh?
I do as I told.
Oh.
You've answered this question.
Okay. Anyway, it's a little jumpy around here, and kind of Jeff jumped in, and all, but it's okay. apology accepted, but I'm just saying, when you look at and I missed the surplus fund the last time, I don't know how, but when you're saying what you want in the fund and then we're above that, I'm assuming, here's another assumption, that if we don't do our increase, that fund will go down. Yeah, that's a good assumption, right? So, and I'm just really concerned about the fact that we kept letting it go down for so long, and now we're needing this 4.5% increase. I don't know, our due diligence as it relates to that. How do we let that happen? Ryan? Ryan is looking like,
Sure, thank you. I do think it would be beneficial if Bethany is still on to walk through that with you, if you would like it, or we could do it at a later time.
Bethany could not.
Yeah,
She was,
yeah, I'll just.
Bethany couldn't.
Oh, I didn't say she couldn't, but my question didn't require, but go on.
I'll defer to the board on that. I just offer that if that's helpful.
I don't need Bethany, I don't think, because it's more than numbers. Thank you, Bethany. It's more about, oh, she left too. Holly left too.
Whole room is getting out of here.
Oh, Jesus. But anyway, it goes back to the people, what we need to do our duty, our due diligence to provide the services that we need for our people. And I'm certainly one that does not want to do any increases anywhere if we can help it. But I'm also realistic that costs are going up for materials and services and all that. And I see that the fund had gone all the way down to 91 million. So I'm concerned about that. So just a little concerned about, and I know we agreed on this as a board, that we wanted to do gradual on the 4.5. When I say agreed, we discussed it, we didn't agree. And so wondering about if there was a lower increase, because for me, I believe that there needs to be an increase according to what we're looking at, and just wondering a lower amount than that, and what that would look like, Diana. Is that a possibility?
If you don't mind, Commissioner, I can probably take that unless.
Come on, Diana.
We could definitely get back to you on the impacts of a lower rate increase for this year and what that would do for the subsequent years in the 10-year plan. Again, we were basing this on what we thought was consistency to keep rates consistent over 10 years. But we can definitely probably get back to you today on that.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question related to this
Sure.
surplus fund, this piece here?
Yes,
Because
sure.
because the surplus fund, I think it might be helpful to better understand what's expected in this surplus fund, because we keep talking about it. We know we want to keep it around 150. We're a little over that right now. So what would happen? I mean, if we do this or don't do that, or how much? I mean, I just think it's an important question for us to better understand, because and you're right. We talked about the 4.5 as a way to provide just one level of increase, hopefully for 10 years, and we wouldn't have to go above it. We knew we wouldn't go below it, because some years it's going to be higher than that, but some years it could be lower than that. So we were trying to figure out what the average, it's an average, really, of what we were talking about. And I, too, remember a conversation about that. But we're so stuck on this surplus fund, I just wonder, if a bond issuance is what created the increase here, what's the expectation here in the near future? What does that mean to the surplus fund? If we have extra in the surplus fund, as we've done before, maybe the increase isn't as high, but I don't think we have I know I don't have an understanding of what that looks like here in the future, given what we're talking about doing by way of the rate increases.
Right, yes, and again, over the 10-year period that we're talking about, there are going to be years when it's above 150 and below. We do project, if the 4.5% rate increase were to go through, it would fall just slightly below 150 in 2025, at the end of 2025, and go back up. Because it's not going to be 150 static every single year. It's going to ebb and flow, just like debt service coverage, which I covered in my presentation.
So that's a bit of an average then, too. We're trying to create an average of the 150 as well.
By the end of that 10-year period, we want that 150, yes. I would, yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
All right.
Can I ask one final question? Did we need the bond levy because we hadn't done any increases? That's why we had to supplement it with a bond levy?
Mr. Aludo?
This
As we had
this
down
actually may be a question for Joseph on
Nobody's
this.
coming up. Nobody wants to
But
come up.
yeah, typically we do new money issuances a couple times when there's either a need to replenish the surplus fund. Sometimes we do it when there's a need to replenish the fund, and also there's a look back period on projects that we only have so long to reimburse ourselves through a bond issuance. So if we know that the surplus fund is going down and too much time is going by, we want to make sure that we do that issuance and reimburse ourselves. But Joseph, I'll turn.
I actually have nothing to add to what Administrator Ludo said. He's exactly correct. All of those factors weighed into the decision, ultimately, the county moving forward with that bond issuance. And it was a collaborative effort on the part of MSD, PFM, and the county administration to do so, and it went well.
Okay. Great. Thank you. That was helpful. Thanks.
Okay, it's the public hearing. No other people are here to speak. I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
Commissioner Reese,
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse,
Yes.
Commissioner Summer Dumas.
Yes.
I'm just wondering what we're
Next
expecting by
steps.
way of timing.
Yeah, what's the
that's
next steps? We've got a lot of questions that are unanswered, and we don't have a deadline of Thursday, but you were trying to go with Thursday. Seems like we may need a little more time. Mr. Aludo, I'll leave that to you.
So it sounds like there are a couple of questions that were asked today that we will get back to the board on, as I said, there's no magic to the Thursday date. That's just the date that was initially scheduled. If we have to push that out, we can do that. But we'll try to get back to you on these questions as quickly as possible. We'll follow up with board offices and see where we are before Thursday, and go from there.
Thursday, and we can't talk to each other, so, I mean, I'm okay if we pushed it back a week, but to allow all the questions to be answered. At least all three of us now can hear what we think about that. Is that okay, or is there somebody who really wants it for this Thursday?
Well, Holly seemed to think she'd get her answers to us this afternoon, so I guess it depends on how quickly we
What
can.
I heard, though, just to be clear, was the SBU budget being reduced. And also, what if we reduce the rate recommendation for this year? What does that mean? And then we can get some further follow-up on the surplus, if there wasn't any, add any clarity.
It's going to take more
I
than.
think it takes more time, because we won't get the chance to,
that's fine.
you'll get us the information, but then we don't have a
Our
chance
deadline's
to
the end of the year, right?
interact. I think 1 week would be reasonable.
So I think that would be December 3rd or 5th then, where it would come back.
Is that decent?
We got Thanksgiving.
Oh, I forgot about Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so that's all right.
No, that's okay. I want to go have some food. Well, ladies, I think while we're here, commissioners, do you want to go with a week, or do you want to go this Thursday?
Well, for me, it just depends on how quickly the responses come to us. I mean, if we can get them,
And if
that's
we
great.
get the responses, we got to get our staff to go back and forth. I mean, how do we interact with the responses?
So if we get something this afternoon, we can follow up with the chiefs of staff tomorrow on this and see where we are. And if that's
Okay.
not enough time, we push till after Thanksgiving.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Okay. Now, Mr. Ludo will present the 2025 administration recommendation budget.
Thank you, commissioners. So as you indicated, Commissioner Reese, it's my pleasure to present to the board today the administration's recommendation for a 2025 all funds budget. Just a couple of notes before I get started, and you kind of alluded to this in your tee-up, Commissioner Reese. This is a presentation on the all funds budget, which is a conglomeration of all of the spending across the county, with some small exceptions like grant funds, which are appropriated separately throughout the year by the board. But second, to your point, this is in fact the administration's budget recommendation to the board. So this is especially for those folks who may be watching at home. This is my recommendation to the board. If you're watching this is not a final budget for 2025 as passed by the commissioners, so don't call commissioner offices to complain about what you hear today. This is my recommendation to the board. Once I make this recommendation, the board will mold this into a final form, which they will act on hopefully in December, and which will become the final 2025 budget for the county. So, Christy, if you could, thank you very much. I did just want to provide a very brief overview of the past several years, and I won't take much time to do this, commissioners, but I think you would join me in agreeing that the work of the county over the past several years has really been some of the most extraordinary and impactful in the recent history of the county. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of things up front for those who may be watching, some of the impact that the county has had over this time. And I will say that this is even, what I'm going to highlight is really over and above just the traditional core work that the county performs on a day-to-day basis. That's operating the Justice Center, running the county's court system, taking 911 calls, managing the election system for the county, operating the crime lab, keeping our children and adults safe through job and family services, stewarding our property tax resources and property ownership records and deeds, issuing building permits. All that stuff that the county does on a routine basis was even superseded by some of the other stuff that has just occurred over the past couple years. So I put this slide together just to highlight a couple of things. I'm not going to walk through every single one of these, but I just wanted to remind the folks that are watching, the board is, I know, well aware of this because you deal with it every single day, but just all the things that have been done over the past several years, facilitated by the decisions of the board in the budget, in part due to financial resources provided by the federal government through the pandemic, et cetera. But we've done so much over the past few years. We've lowered public safety costs to communities. We've kept people out of homelessness. We've increased programming to help youth. We created 750 units of affordable housing and are not done in that regard. We've helped train people for new jobs coming out of the pandemic. We've taken county services mobile at almost 300 events over the past couple years. We've helped communities with some of their most pressing development and infrastructure needs. So I wanted to just take a very brief moment just to, before we get into the meat of the recommended budget, just to collectively celebrate all of the things that we have done over the past several years that have just made this county a better place. And as we get into the 2025 budget, these are the types of things that we want to try to find a way to continue as we move forward. So now just transitioning into the meat of the 2025 budget, just an upfront note. This was and as the board is aware, as I've been communicating with you over the past several months, this was a very difficult budget to balance. We began the process with a $50 million gap between request and projected revenues. As we'll discuss in the presentation, revenue growth has slowed, yet the community demand, the community need and spending pressures remain. So while the budget is still designed to accomplish big, important things, it does so in the context of an increasingly constrained revenue environment. That said, the all funds budget is presented to you at a level of $1.3 billion. The all funds budget, again, for those watching at home, includes all the various funds of the county, all the restricted funds, which are those that can only be used for expressed specific purposes, and the general fund, which is the largest and most discussed fund of the county, which is our primary operating fund. The general fund budget is balanced at a recommended level of $389.3 million. That is actually a slight decrease from 2024, roughly 1.7%, primarily due to some large capital allocations that were in the 2024 budget and the fact that the 2024 budget accounted for a presidential year in the Board of Elections, which always comes at a higher cost. Sources, where does the county get its revenue under this budget? The single largest source of revenue to the county's general fund is the sales tax. In Hamilton County, of the sales tax charged on purchases, there's 5.75% that go to the state of Ohio. There's 0.8% that goes to fund SORTA. 0.75% of that amount goes to the county general fund, and there's 0.5% that goes to fund the Riverfront Sales Tax Fund. There are other revenue sources, but you can see that we are a very sales tax dependent county. But there are other revenue sources as well: property taxes, service fees, intergovernmental revenues, revenues from the state, that type of thing, and interest earnings, which I'll discuss a little bit later as well. In terms of how we go about using this revenue, as I've reported in past years, typically between 70 and 75% of Ohio, or of the revenue that we receive, goes to fund public safety and judicial functions of the county. So this would include the Justice Center, the court system, 911 center, crime lab, prosecutor's office. Then you get into more of the general government fund, the general government activities, the elections, county facilities, planning and development, the auditor's office, treasurer's office, et cetera. But you can see that the vast majority, for someone watching at home wanting to know where my tax dollar goes, the vast majority of the dollars that the county receives in our general fund goes to fund public safety and judicial functions, with the remaining functions of the county accounting for the rest. A note on the reserve balance. So presuming we fully implement the 2025 budget as recommended, our general fund reserve balance is projected for 2025 at $66.6 million. That is a 17.1% end-of-year reserve balance. The general fund reserve, as the board is aware, is an important metric for the finances of a local government. It's looked at by financial institutions, bond agencies, as a significant indicator of our financial health. It also helps ensure against unknown shocks, unforeseen expenditures. It helps cash flow major transactions. For context, the county policy has traditionally been 15%, to hold a reserve balance of 15%. Government Finance Officers Association recommends a level of 2 months of operating expenses, which is roughly 16.7%. Across the country, you can look and find local governments. The policies range anywhere from much smaller policies on reserve to much higher levels on reserve. So I think the board has taken a pretty prudent approach to this over the past several years, or in the past. In terms of revenue drivers for the budget, revenues are projected to be up just under 3% for 2025. This is lower than we've seen in recent years, and provides the basis for much of the budget recommendation. So for perspective, and I'm primarily focusing on sales tax here, put a note in here that after growth of 5 to 6% over the past 2 years, sales tax is projected to grow at a pace of less than 1% in 2024, and 4 out of our 10 months this year have seen year-over-year declines in sales tax revenue. So we are seeing a significant slowdown in the growth of sales tax. Maybe not entirely surprising when we think of the inflationary environment that we've been in over the past several years. This is not, from my perspective, a reason to panic about the future revenues of the county. We are still projecting to see growth, but it is slower growth than we've seen, and thus warrants some caution in our ongoing expenditures. I did want to provide a note on one particular area of revenue that runs counter to the revenue trend that we've been seeing, and that relates to interest earnings. So interest earnings are actually up significantly from prior years. The problem is that interest earnings can fluctuate wildly over time based upon the actions of the federal government. They're a very tough revenue source to pin down as something to rely on for an operating revenue. I know over the past decade we've seen interest earnings as low as $8 million a year. We've seen it over $30 million a year. And as we've seen the Federal Reserve just start to pull back on interest rates, we expect to see more of that reduction in the coming years. The county treasurer, projects receiving approximately $24 million in additional interest earnings over what we have budgeted for 2025. But these are, what we've tried to do is budget interest earnings at a level that we think we can sustainably count on for operating revenues in the future. If we were to pick a number substantively higher than that, and that, say we choose a number for the operating budget of, say, 10 million more, and then that number falls, it would be the equivalent, again, of sales tax falling by $10 million in a year, and we would be in a position of having to make significant operational cuts. So we're trying to balance finding a level that we can sustainably count on for interest earnings over the course of time. So we've recognized $22.9 million in the recommendation to the board this year. We actually raised that amount a little bit during budget balancing as we were struggling to balance this year's budget, and we actually raised that amount by $4 million after a lot of consultation within our budget office and with our financial advisors. But later on in this recommendation, I'll provide a recommendation to the board on a use for some of these additional resources as one-time expenditures, not for the operating budget itself. So we've talked about revenues. Want to also touch on some of the major expenditure drivers. And the budget that you've received, commissioners, lays this out in much more detail. I'm not going to go into specific detail on this in the presentation today in order to conserve time. But from a department perspective, we see that the courts are up by $6.5 million in this year's budget. Juvenile court is up by roughly $3.5 million. And that is part and parcel to additional staff being added for the reinitiation of the Hillcrest School. Veteran Services is up approximately $1.4 million. The board is, I think, well aware that Veteran Services Commission has come in with a higher budget this year. The budget reflects a $1.4 million increase. Economic Development is actually down by $2.67 million. I'll discuss that in more depth shortly. The Communications Center is also down by around $1.1 million as they are drawing on the surplus they have in that department. The sheriff is down by a very small amount, $12,000. I just note that just because it is not a department that we traditionally see reductions in. It does happen on occasion, but the sheriff's office budget is recommended as year-over-year $12,000 decrease. Compensation levels, the budget does reflect a general non-bargaining wage increase of 3%. That totals roughly $3.9 million. Every 1% of general fund increase roughly relates to about $1.3 million in additional salary. It also reflects medical benefits up by about $4.3 million, and so with the total benefit increase of around $8.2 million. In terms of FTEs in the budget, the recommended budget supports 2,690 FTEs. This is approximately 47 additional positions to the table of organization. Again, most of these are in juvenile court, and I'll remind the board of juvenile court coming in, I believe it was back in 2023, to discuss some significant needs they had at the juvenile detention facility. This reflects those positions. It reflects some additional positions for Hillcrest, many of which of those are reimbursed by Job and Family Services, but they are initial general fund expenditures, even if JFS is reimbursing. Across the entirety of the general fund is absorbing, while there's 47 new positions, the general fund is absorbing around 117 additional employees. So these may be employees that in positions that currently have existed for a long time within the county structure, but for a variety of reasons are now being absorbed by the general fund. It could be grant resources that no longer apply. It could be restricted fund balances that are depleted, and those positions are now being moved into the general fund. But overall, 47 new positions on the table of organization. Programmatically, tried to address three major issues in the 2025 budget. Number one is the issue of transition, and providing an effective and seamless transition to a time when we appear to be seeing revenues flatten a bit. We know that federal grants are evaporating, and yet some of those same community demands remain. So how do we transition into an organization that accomplishes the things we need to, that are expected of the county in this new environment? We want to provide stability for both the core mandated functions of the county and the policy goals of the board, and to continue to make progress on all these functions. In terms of transition, I just want to note the impact of the quarter, and I provide some more context on this in the written budget, commissioners, but the impact of the quarter-cent sales tax on the organization. Following that implementation back in 2019, we have essentially moved forward on all of the initiatives for which that sales tax was targeted. We have right-sized the organization to the degree it was not in the past. We have adjusted competitive wages. Our wages are now, I won't say that they are addressed in every single position across the entirety of the county, but by and large, our wages are much more competitive. Our staff turnover rate is about half of the rate that is the Department of Labor sees as average for public employers. We have shored up public safety. Since 2019, our budgets have supported the development of a new academy program at the sheriff to help support staffing in the sheriff's office. It has supported the advancement of intelligence-led policing strategies in the sheriff's office, real-time crime investments, new corrections officers in juvenile court, employees at the public defender and prosecutor's office, as well as improved technology systems to do all of this work more efficiently. We've also invested in community partnerships focused on development and infrastructure. So everything that the board had targeted when we had implemented that sales tax, we are moving forward on. We are now seeing, however, slower revenue growth. We know that the federal pandemic aid, which started back with the CARES Act and proceeded into ARPA, is coming to an end. We are now seeing larger and more difficult budget gaps, and are starting to envision a future now where budget or departmental growth is going to need to be linked to much more modest revenue growth scenarios. A little bit about the gap. I won't go into too much on this slide, other than to say that this just shows that we did have about a $50 million gap this year, and we ultimately closed that gap to balance. A bit about how we closed it. The first $20 million were really targeted reductions directly to programs, staffing that departments were recommending. And I can say, commissioners, for having served in this seat since 2016, the requests that we were receiving, these are not fluff requests. These were significant requests of these departments and agencies to help with the efficiency and the operations and the public service that the county offers to its residents. These were personnel requests in court agencies that were demonstrated as common in other counties and would assist with the functioning of the court system. These were personnel requests in the public defender's office. There were reductions in county facilities requests for maintenance. The sheriff anticipates greater hiring rates, but we chose to align the budget recommendation more with historical trends, even though we know that there is a risk that hiring could proceed at a higher rate with compensation being adjusted. There were employee benefit programs that I know the board was made aware of that were recommended that we chose to reduce in the recommendation. So we started with these targeted reductions, reflecting the conversation as we talked about with MSD. We pulled back on vacancy as well. So recognizing that there may be more churn in the departments than they might project, we pulled back by about $16 million on staffing requests, reflecting our expectation of higher vacancy. That is a risk in this budget. We made revenue revisions of around $6 million. We pulled some requests out of departments that we felt were actually more one-time capital requests or non-recurring requests, and we put those into a one-time category. And then at the end, we still went about making about $4.7 million worth of across-the-board reductions. So in terms of the budget programming, the goals were fiscal stability and maintaining progress, to maintain current taxation levels, to continue recent efforts to support and right-size our mandated services, to maintain the strategic investments that the board has made in all these areas, public safety, community partnerships, et cetera. And also one that we have not typically seen in the past, but to find strategies for continuing our ARPA programming through and beyond 2026. So I'm just going to walk through, commissioners, some of these programmatic areas, and this is not all-inclusive, but just a little bit about what the budget contains. So in the public safety judicial area, we are retaining the $5 detail rate. This is very important to local communities. If I can remember a day when that number was in excess of $22 per detail. And for those watching at home, this is, for lack of a better term, when someone in a community calls 911, the community in which that person was calling gets a bill from the county. That bill has been, like I said, over $20 on the past. For years, it was right around $14 and $17. When the sales tax was initiated back in 2019, we dropped that to $5 per detail. That saves communities between $3 and $4 million a year that they can then reinvest into their community in public safety. So that the $5 detail rate is retained. The budget reinitiates Hillcrest through juvenile court, funds various technology issues or initiatives in the sheriff's, prosecutor, and public defender's office. The care pods at the Justice Center are funded. I talked a little bit about restricted funds. The general fund looks to support those depleted restricted funds. There's some modest staffing increases that are supported. The patrol function of the sheriff, as well as the Justice Center capital improvements, as has been board policy over the past several years. Economic development, just a note on this. So when the county initiated the additional quarter-cent sales tax, this was one of the most pressing priorities of the board, to make sure that we are partnering to a greater extent with the jurisdictions within the county, to make sure that we're taking care of and helping them and serving as a partner with them on some of their most urgent infrastructure and development needs. We have done that. We've supported grant projects in 23 communities over the past few years, spending more than $8 million on some of these high priority projects. We've prepared dozens of high potential sites for development for future jobs and investment. We've supported the operation of large tourism events and large community events. We've expanded our core economic development programming through a range of programming in Alloy and elsewhere. As our economic development budget, as our economic development activity increased, the economic development budget expanded probably more rapidly than any other area in the county. So as our revenues have become a bit more constrained, the budget recommends moderating some of these expenditures here. So you will note that in the budget document you have that most of these programs are slated for reductions this year. And this again is a recommendation of the administration, which we know we'll have to discuss with board offices. We certainly want to make sure we continue to meet the policy priorities of the board in helping and assisting with these communities, and look forward to the feedback of the board in determining whether we hit this number correctly or whether we need to make some adjustments here. But while the funding is reduced, the recommended budget still does retain virtually all of these programs: community revitalization grants, community impact program, the tourism and economic development grants, small event grants, site readiness grants, bike trail allocations. All these things remain in the budget, albeit at a reduced level. Social services, as always, the budget focuses significantly on funding support for our most vulnerable populations. Job and family services, prevention services through the Children's Services Levy continued at $5 million. Full funding for the Veteran Services Commission at $2.8 million. Increased funding for short-term housing and reentry through the Family Services and Treatment Levy. Also, the One Ohio grants, the direct allocations are supported in this budget. We also begin, this is the first time we've discussed, not the first time we've discussed it, but the first time it makes its way into a budget document, commissioners, and that is the transition of some of our critical ARPA programs into more sustainable funding pathways, recognizing that we have to have our ARPA funding allocated and obligated by end of 2024 and spent by 2026. So this reflects the 513 relief program at a combined level of $651,000 budgeted in 2025 across various levies and some still in ARPA. The Senior Utility Assistance Program is budgeted across ARPA and the Senior Services Levy at $1.478 million. The Inspire program is at $275,000 budgeted in the Children's Services Levy. So we've started to think about how do we continue some of these programs. This is not all of the programs, but many of the programs that the board has focused on, how we continue those post-ARPA. The budget continues moving forward on many of our most signature capital needs. The Hamilton County Regional Safety Complex, the EMA 911 facility construction, all continue into their next phase in this budget. The satellite office in Forest Park, the Bond Hill Mercy acquisition, the budget accounts for that. Moving forward on the next phase of the capital improvements at our temporary and a permanent animal shelter. We have some major capital projects on our facilities related to facades and elevators. This continues progress on those. The convention district, as well as capital at Paycor and GABP. As the board is aware, there are some ARPA programs that are going to continue beyond 2024. The budget continues with those. The Affordable Housing Program, home repair programs, the Mobile Crisis Team, our Small Business Advisory Services, our workforce investment work through the Talent Collaborative, and Foresee for Children. The budget does, I mentioned earlier about some one-time investment recommendations. So this is an example of some of those. The remainder are within your budget, commissioners. But the first of these is we've been apprised of and have been communicating with the group that is looking to press for a National Women's Soccer League in Hamilton County and Greater Cincinnati. We've recommended a $5 million site development grant as a one-time allocation for that effort. We are aware of the City of Cincinnati's commitment to the Sundance Film Festival and their effort to lure Sundance from its current home in Park City, Utah. This budget allocates a one-time allocation of $2 million, an ongoing allocation of around $150,000 from resources in the occupancy tax for a period of 5 years. There's a technology migration project in the Court of Common Pleas that would be one time. We are also counting $1 million of the current budget in the Veteran Services Commission in this category as well. We are still budgeting the full amount of the Veteran Services Commission, but this just reflects the fact that we are not yet certain as this is the first year of a major increase, how they will go about expending those dollars and how much of that will be sustainable versus more of a one-time. There are some risks in this budget, commissioners, as there are with any. Again, the revenue softness that we have seen in sales tax, history would support a position that will recover. I think, as I said, a lot of what we might be seeing right now reflects coming off of a period of high inflation. So if you go back and look at history where we've seen softness, we've seen growth after that. So I'm hoping that we see that again. But the budget reflects a cautious approach to sales tax in particular. We also are seeing pullbacks on interest rates. So we expect to continue to see a reduction in interest rates. Department spending and staffing pressures. As I said, there were years when we knew for a fact the departments were going to end the year on average with significant levels of vacancy. Given the great work that the county has done with the guidance and direction of the board, we have remedied some of our major compensation issues. That means we're hiring in some of these positions at a much easier clip than we had in the past. So to the degree departments find it that they are staffing consistently, much more consistently than they were, that's going to create spending pressures in some of these departments versus what we have in the budget. That's a risk, as well as continued wage pressures as well. Commissioners, that's a general overview of the budget as recommended to you. We do have a hearing coming up in your commission chambers this Thursday at 1:15 p.m. We also have a hearing scheduled at 6 p.m. out of the Silverton Municipal Building on December 3rd of this year. Look forward to discussing the budget publicly more at that point in time and hearing feedback from stakeholders. And at this point, Madam President, I will turn it back over to you. Happy to answer any questions, hear any feedback at this point in time, but we'll certainly be following up with your offices to discuss this in more detail.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll open it up, Vice President Driehaus.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, for the presentation. Thank you to also John Brugan, to Holly Chrisman, to the entire budget staff, some of whom are in the room, for all the hard work that was done here. As you said, it was a challenging year. We had $50 million of requests over what we had available in revenue, so no small feat to close that budget gap. And so thank you also to the department heads and the elected officials that we all had to work with to bring this into balance, and for that continued partnership with them as we decide and prioritize on how to spend the revenues that are available to us. So I just want to thank everyone for their hard work. So as you say, it was a challenging year, primarily driven through the slow growth of the sales tax. So it's hard to project how that's going to look in the future, but I hope that we don't have too many additionally challenging years here as we go, but I respect the fact that you've done some conservative estimates as we look forward and have, that always shows up here in this budget. I do want to also note that, and you said it, we had an increase in revenue available to us through the sales tax, which, as you said, was the primary source of revenue for the county in 2019, but we're still only at 0.75 of a penny. So I just do want to recognize this. I think it gets lost sometimes. Our competitive set relies on a much larger share of sales tax to fund their general revenue funds, and we're at 0.75, which is pretty low compared to almost everybody else in the state. I think there are maybe 3 or 4 other counties as low as we are, and everybody else is higher. And there are 88 counties in this state. So I just want to note that by way of comparison, because it speaks to how constrained we are really when it comes to funding some of the basic services here in the county. But we do it, and we do it with structurally balanced budget, and I'm proud of that work, and I'm proud that we're able to do that. So as you say, we have funded the core services of the county. It's a slight reduction year over year, and you noted that some of the one-time spends in last year's budget, particularly with the Board of Elections, don't show up in this budget because we have a very different cycle coming up for the BOE and some other things. So I appreciate you keeping this a constrained budget, but it also does continue to invest in some really important things to the board. And I'll speak for myself. Public safety is the vast majority of this budget. It's 70%, and so we have invested in partnership with the sheriff and the courts, particularly juvenile court, as they do quite a bit of transitioning with Hillcrest to serve some of the youth in our community, and it's really important that we continue to invest in these are the core services that people count on us to do well. If we don't do our jobs well, the community is going to know it, and so I'm proud that we continue to make those priority investments, and it's in partnership, obviously, with the elected officials and the sheriff and JV Court. We also have partnerships, as you mentioned, with JFS, significant partnerships in senior services, the engineer's office, facilities, some green investments. We've got technology spends in this budget to try to keep up, particularly over across the street in the courts. So all significant investments that the county continues to make that are really important to the citizens. There are also investments here related to economic development and supporting small businesses in the local economy. albeit smaller than I would prefer, and I'll get to that in a second. But we're also in this budget continuing our partnership with the 49 jurisdictions in Hamilton County and giving our employees a 3% raise, which I think is a modest increase. It's kind of par for the course here at the county, but I do think we need to continue to have those kinds of modest raises to our employees so that we can recruit and retain good quality individuals. And I've said this in the community before, this is so important to this community and to our residents because we're talking about the sheriff's deputies, we're talking about the 911 operators, we're talking about the individuals that go out in this community and keep kids safe at home. These are really important jobs, and we need to make sure that we are recruiting and retaining good people to provide these services to the constituents of the county. And it also has this reserve, the fiscally responsible reserve, I think, of 17.1. The goal is always 15, so we're a little over, thankfully, what we generally would have in this, and I recognize that that was not easy to do, so I appreciate having that kind of money left in the reserve just in case. So as I look at the budget, I again am thankful for all the work that went into it. There are a couple things that I will be talking to my colleagues about through our chiefs of staff related to economic development. I'm going to hope to restore some of the programming that was cut by the administration. And then one thing that's on my mind, and I know it's not easy, and I suspect that's why it didn't make the cut in the budget. We've all three talked, and I have talked about affordable housing. And we were able to do $40 million worth of investment in affordable housing through ARPA. And we don't have a sustainable funding source in this budget, nor have we in the past, for affordable housing, and yet and I'll speak for myself, it's a top priority. And so as we think through, what we have done through ARPA and think through building on that investment in conjunction with the city and some private partners, I'm hoping that the administration can think through if there are any opportunities in any of these funds to provide some kind of sustainable funding source for affordable housing moving forward. That's the one piece that I know it's challenging because it would have to be a significant investment, but I'm hoping that we can turn over some rocks and see if there's anything available. If there's not, there's not. But I do note that it's not in here, and I'll be working to try to figure out that equation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dumas.
Thank you, Jeff, and your staff for all your hard work. I know you went in, as we said earlier, with a gap, and you attempted to close the gap, and you did. So I appreciate that. I'm going to look through the whole budget book with another fine-tooth comb in case I have specific questions for you. I want, as a board, for us to remember that when we allocated funding to certain projects and events and things like that, that it was supposed to be a one-time allocation to help those different projects to get back on their feet in Hamilton County. But we have since allocated money. I think this would be the fourth year if we agree to allocate to outside entities that are providing, I would say, maybe entertainment purposes to our residents, and that we remember that we were only trying to help them to get started. I'll just make that comment. You said at the end, Jeff, and I'm not going to get specifically, and I'm sure I have other questions, but at the end you were saying we are, how did you say it, as far as our revenue was very continued revenue softness. And my question is, which you don't have to answer now, is what are we as a staff, as administration, looking at how do we generate more revenue, creative thinking. And I'm sure you guys have gotten started on that with the softness of the revenue and not knowing our future after beginning January of 2025. We don't know what to expect. I'd like to see creative thinking, brainstorming as it relates to what else can we do. And I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure you guys are already thinking about that. how can we generate more revenue if we get something unexpected as it relates to our budget, the state budget, the national budget. And then just a general question about the building permits. I was surprised how much money they generate, the 3.3. Is this inclusive of the increase that we gave them?
Commissioner, I will have to check. I would imagine, yes, that it is, that increase, that the budget analyst would have worked with the department to factor in the projected increase. So I will give a cautious yes that does contain the recommended increase, but typically it does. But I will check on that and get back to you.
Okay, very good. But I just, to close, just am very excited that we were able to include those things that were, of course, a necessity for our people in Hamilton County. And I'm also going to bring to my colleagues, probably looking at that remaining ARPA money and how we can possibly use it to help with the PTR. And if there's any way we can increase the amount of PTR that we had said 12% before, and it was a recommendation of maybe 18, and I'm leading toward 30% PTR. And if there's a way we can do that, I would be really excited about that, because as we know, and it's said many times, that people are struggling and everything is going up. I mean, drugs are going up, the stamps are going up, the fees for Duke Energy are going up. Of course, mortgage rates have already gone up. So I'm really looking at and ask the administration to look at the possibility of some of the remainder of our ARPA money because we use some of it for mortgage relief. If there's any way we can help to, and maybe bypass the policy that we said how much we wanted to spend or have in our reserve, our sales tax reserve, maybe for this year, to look at the policy and maybe try to give the full complement of the PTR if we can. So that's all I have right now.
Thank you very much. And on that note, I think Thursday, are we voting on that? I have a resolution asking for the 30%, but are we voting on that?
We have it, Commissioner, as a by leave for Thursday. Commissioner Summer Dumas had posed some questions on some different rates, including the 30% as well. So we're going to get back to the board on that this afternoon and tomorrow. I know, Commissioner Reese, you have a resolution that you were going to bring forward on 30%. So we'll get all this information to you as quickly as we can tomorrow. If we can vote on Thursday and whatever the board's preference is, we can do that. Like I said, back with the MSD thing, if we have to push it to December 3rd or December 5th, we can do that as well.
Okay. Yeah.
December 6th was the deadline of the auditor's office.
Okay, because I have an open mind to that concept. Let me just echo what my colleagues have said, thanking to you, Mr. Ludo, and the entire administration, finance team, and all of the different departments that came before us and presented their budgets and sharpened the pencil to close the gap and present us with something that I think is a good foundation as we look into the details of each of the items. I think what it shows is that what the citizens are going through, when you say that sales tax is not what it was, people are holding on, holding out because they just can't afford. They don't have disposable income like they may have had in past years. And so they're hanging on. And I think when we look at an all funds budget, it's not just this budget, it's all funds, everything we got available, every decision that we make. One, we just talked about the 30% that was promised to the taxpayers, that they would get a full 30% rebate on our portion. They was promised that with the two stadiums. Whether it is MSD, we just had had them present their budget, and we're facing an increase. When a person looks at their own personal budget, They got this much money. They don't just say, I got an MSD fund and I got a restricted fund and they got one fund, and they're trying to make those ends come together. And I think what we're seeing with the economy is that people don't have the disposable income, so that affects the sales tax. When they go to the grocery store, they can't buy 2 packs of bacon. They got to take one, cut it in half, and try to stretch it because they just don't have the money. So I think we're seeing, like you said, the economy having its effect on us, but I do appreciate you providing us with a foundation. I do have some questions that I will have, more questions as I dig deeper into the line item by line item. And I know you've presented kind of the big picture piece. But as we get into these line items, one question I had, I'll start off with, is the 513 relief bus. And on there you have about 600,000, a little over 600,000. Do we know what that cost? And I thought we still had ARPA money available because they don't have to be spent until, I don't know, what, 26?
Yes, so I think it is, that is broken down by ARPA and levy funds, but we have that full line item budget and can provide that to you.
Yeah, I want to see that before I just agree to it, because that's one of our most effective. It's not the only, but it's one of our most effective. The citizens like it. It's Hamilton County on wheels going out in suburban and urban Hamilton County. And we've helped on 30,000 people. So that's very effective. I can't really make a decision on a number until I see what does it really cost to do it, what have we done, and what is this particular impact. But that's one that if we were to take it to the ballot or take a survey, that would be one of the top things that the citizens have said that they enjoy and benefit from. So I wanted to make sure I can't make a decision because I don't have the actual numbers in front of me. So that will be helpful. The other thing is, just off the top, I do want to concur with public safety. When people say, are y'all investing in safety? And I'm happy that it was brought out that 70% of public safety is in this budget. And our board over the years has put public safety first with a partnership of our sheriff and courts. So I think that's very important that is in the budget. In addition, though, you mentioned that we've got some additional funds. And for me, I like to know all funds, every dollar, every little bucket, what's there. And you said we have something with interest rates. And you said we're spending in this budget, or did you not say that? You said there'll be something coming later. Was it later in the presentation?
No, I covered both of them. So the treasurer is reflecting roughly $46 million, give or take, in interest earnings projected for 2025. We are recognizing only about half of that as revenue for the operating budget, recognizing that as interest rates decrease and those dollars are likely not to be there in the future, we can't count on them for operating resources moving forward, or else we would be budgeting for something sustained in the operating budget that would then go away. But what we can do is recognize those as one-time resources. So those additional dollars that there's about 24 million that we have recognized as one-time resources. We provided the recommendation on the use of some of that. I would say that the remainder, we've got a lot of capital needs that some of those may be programmed towards in the future, but certainly open to a conversation with the board on that front.
Okay. How do you come up with the 20-something million versus 46? I understand it's a one-time, but we do, unlike past budgets, we would, in other jobs I had, they would do 2-year budgets, but we do a budget every single year anyway. So how did you come with only 20-something million out of 46? Did we just leave some in a?
Well, because we know that the 46 million is extremely high in terms of interest earnings on an annual basis. We've seen them as low as $8 million. So what we tried to do is project an amount that we think we can sustainably count on for operating purposes over the years, recognizing that the Fed has already started pulling back on those interest rates in September. And we would imagine we're going to see some additional rate reductions as well. So it is, there's a bit of science to it, but there's also a little bit of art to it as well. Like I said, we initially started off with a number that was closer to 18. As we got into balancing, we actually increased it and recognized that we needed to account for more of that in the operating budget. That's a risk. If interest earnings continue to drop and we only see 20 million, then we're going to be short. But we're trying to be fair to the operating budget while at the same time protect the county's stability.
And what things in this budget did you put the 20 million toward?
That is.
I know you have a.
Yeah, that is. There is a slide on that.
Which slide?
Let's see. It is. I don't know if the slides are numbered. It's one of the last ones, Commissioner.
Is that the one-time non?
It is the one-time non-recurring. Correct.
Okay, you got the Veterans Commission in here, and then you have Veterans Commission at 1.4 million. You
So there's
a million.
So we have the veterans in at 1. In total. I think the veterans in at 2.8. But we took 1 million of it and put it in this category, recognizing that this is the first year they're going to be operating at this level. We're not quite certain how much of that is going to be that they're going to find is sustained. So we just wanted to hedge on that a little bit. At the end of the day, they have budgeted exactly what they have requested. We just put it.
What is that? 2.4 million.
2.8. I think it was 2.8, Commissioner.
And does that include the, would that include, I don't want to leave it subjective, does that include the veterans appreciation?
Yes, it would include budget for the veterans
I would
appreciation.
like that to be clarified in there, because I don't want to leave it up to him, otherwise we would already have it.
And I know that they are planning for that right now. We've got administrative contacts that are staying a part of that effort as well. So yes, they are. They're absolutely planning on moving forward with that in the 2025 budget.
Yeah, I would want that identified, because this was something that our board came forward with, and I would like for it to be identified. Okay, the other thing is you got 5 million of those dollars going to the National Women's League Women's Soccer League site development, and I'm supportive. I've indicated that to Mr. Birding, but I also I want to see a youth. Amateur youth sports facility. And I don't understand why some of these things we do, we can't combine. I don't want to fund offices. Because already we got the Bengals with their offices that the taxpayers are funding. We're not trying to build office buildings. We want something that can bring in revenue that more people can utilize. We don't want to, so he claimed he was open to it, but I'm putting it out there so my colleagues are aware that that's something that, and I feel if we're going to put $5 million in there, it was brought up earlier about how could we bring in revenue. And when you look at the amateur sports, it's a $92 billion industry. $92 billion. But to just do an office that we don't get anything from it, because we don't do income tax, so we're not getting salaries. We don't get nothing off of a person's income tax. That's not what the county does. So I'm always looking at how can we work together and not be in silos. So if we putting up 5 million, I'd like to see, and on our thing, it's always been, well, let's study it. We've done no study on this. We're going with it. No study, no consultants hired. And I feel like, to be honest, the youth sports have been slowed down. And then next thing I know, Northern Kentucky. I'm not giving it to Northern Kentucky. I want it over here. We don't make a dime off of Northern Kentucky. They're nice people. We want to work together, but we don't make any money off of them. So I feel like they've slowed my idea down, bogged me down with a bunch of consultants studying and looking, and we confused and we don't know what it is. And then they come in and all of a sudden we done found $5 million. And when I talked to Mr. Birding, he said he was interested in seeing how we could work together and have this sports. He was very enthusiastic. So I'd like to get a report back from you, Mr. Ludo, after talking to Mr. Birding and seeing if this is something that can be, as he indicated, we could work together. So now you got something that, and I want to thank my colleagues because you all supported us looking into it, and we've been waiting and waiting. But I mean, you got colleagues up here. We got to get elected. I got over 212,000 people voting. They've got voters. So these things should be taken serious when we present something. And Mr. Birding had some. He said he had some ideas of how we could work together. But I haven't heard anything. I turned it over to you, and I ain't heard nothing. And now I see $5 million. So I'm just saying I want to be supportive of this, but I want to have something that's not offices only. I want something that we can make some money off of, or we can partner. I think they would be a great partner to have. And why can't we partner? Why can't we work together? And so I'm glad we were able to find some money. Now that we found some money, how can we work together? So I'd like to get from you before I go with the budget, because I wouldn't want to just say, well, forget you, Commissioner, what you brought up, and we done looked at it, and we done slowed it down, and the Convention and Visitors Bureau is happy that Northern Kentucky now done tried to take our idea. No, let's work together, and I'd like to just see what happened. He said you two were gonna get together. I'd like to see, that would be a great thing. The National Women's Soccer League, it has a amateur sports facility, and we're gonna be able to bring tournaments, and high school kids get scholarships, and now with a national soccer, I mean, this would be huge for us. It would be huge, and you see those things in Indiana through NBA. They have facilities that the NBA has their training, and they have it. A youth amateur, and we can do that here. So he has some exciting ideas. I want to know, can we put those ideas to work as we go through this budget? And I'm glad we were able to find some funding to go with that. Sundance Film Festival, I think is important, and I see it as a partnership. County comes in, it's a partnership. And I'm looking forward to looking into that and being supportive. So I think you've gotten creative on some things. There's some other things that, as I go through it with a fine-tooth comb this weekend, and we look at that. I do have a question, though, and I think you provided an organizational chart, but without funding. Now, I want to be clear. I don't want to just blow up, government. We just keep creating positions, because once they're on the organizational chart, it's hard to get them off. We just saw that with MSD, got all these vacancies and still want to fund them because you can't get them off the org chart. So I'd like to I sent an email. I verbally said it, and then we sent an email on October the 21st. And my office said they were following up on President Reese's request for an updated organizational chart, including a breakdown of all positions added over the past 4 years. Additionally, President Reese would like an overview of salaries and understanding what those salaries are that fall up under our Board of County Commissioners. So I want to see these departments, I want to see the organizational chart, I want to see the salaries, and I want to see the budgets of those departments that fall up under us. Because I want to keep my eye on, we don't just keep adding. As you've indicated, we got a soft economy, soft budget, uncertainty, and we've been doing a great job, but we don't have to keep adding. And so I want to see what the salaries are. I want to see these departments. We just did rebranding, but then I saw a whole lot of T-shirts and buttons and all that. And where did that come from? Where did it come from? It came real quick. Where did it come from? I'm not saying I'm against it, but I need to keep my eye on it. ink pens and pens and all that with all this is great, but I want to see where did it come from. So I want all of these departments and what are their budgets and who is, what are they making? What is the salaries? So that I'm familiar with what we're doing as we're moving forward. So I have not received that, and I look forward to receiving it.
Yeah, Commissioner, and I'm sorry, I thought at the beginning of your comment, you had said you thought you had received the org chart, but without the salary. I don't know that you've received any of it yet. So
Yeah, I saw something in the back. You had some
there was a general org chart,
general,
but, no,
it's not what I asked.
Frank and I are working on exactly what you've asked for. The HR system we have is not real elegant in terms of how it allows us to print out that type of information in a way that's readily digestible, because it's a lot of positions. But we are.
I was talking about the ones that fall up under you.
Yes, no, it's.
You had given me something when I first got elected, but I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, we're trying to do it in a way that shows exactly what you're asking for. It's a little bit different of a format, but he and I were reviewing something last week, so we are still working on that. I hope to get it to you by the end of this week.
Okay, yeah, I need that because I need to know what the money is. The other thing is I also want to see what are the consultants. We got lots of consultants. Everybody fall up under consultants. What is that? Who are the people? What are they getting consulting for? Or how much money are they getting? We got a lot of consultants. I don't know if it's in engineers, but lawyers. Every time we have a executive session, I want to shake my head and say, look at the clock, because it's like cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And we need to get our hands around it. So those are the ones that don't fall in buckets, but I want to get down to the line items as we're combing. I don't want anybody else to say, man, we need to comb and audit and find out where every dime is. We could kind of look at some of these things, and maybe they're good, and maybe there's some cost savings, or you've recommended some cost savings in some of those areas. And if you have, I'd like to be aware of it as we're presenting the final budget. So those are just the questions that I have so far. But again, starting at the gap, at closing the gap, really appreciate that. And I look forward to hearing from citizens and combing through the line items. All right, well, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Reese?
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse? Yes. Commissioner Summer Dumas?
Yes.